across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It's Monday. I'm Peter Cardwell and this is Talk Drive. Thank you so much for your company. There's an awful lot to talk about. We'll be speaking to Mike Neville in just a second, the former Detective Chief Inspector of the Metropolitan Police, about transport safety, about safety on our trains after the weekend's attack. There are now charges in that. If you want to talk about that, that's absolutely fine to talk about the issue in general, but not about the suspect, because we want to make sure that the legal system does its job and we don't want to prejudice that trial. But of course, I'll take calls on all of that. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about real safety being reviewed. We'll also talk about Reform UK and what they would do for your pocket, the financial plans that Nigel Farage has been outlining today. There's still some questions I'd like to ask about that, and there is a Reform UK person coming on a little bit later on. We'll talk about Nigel Farage saying we're the Workers' Party but can't promise tax cuts. What about Rachel Reeves? 23 days to her budget and she's weighing up more than 100 tax and spending plans. Also, is diversity a strength in our society? We're often told diversity is a strength. Well, most people don't believe that. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. A new 49% of people, according to a new poll by the National Centre for Social Research, feel that diversity strengthens society, compared to 64% of Americans. So a majority of people don't think that. We'll talk about Prince Andrew as well. Trump says he feels badly for the royal family. Could he lose his Falklands medal after being stripped of the rank? And also the schools, Orion schools, who haven't put a statement out on this, are comparing Reform UK's policies to fascism. Well, Zara Sultana compared Nigel Farage to fascist. We talked about that on Friday and Saturday. So what do you think about the fact that children in schools are being taught that Reform UK are fascist? I think that's absolutely disgraceful. We'll also talk to Mark Francois MP about the former SAS soldiers condemning Labour's new Troubles Bill. This is about prosecution of soldiers. Soldier F, of course, recently found not guilty on all charges in regard to Bloody Sunday over 50 years ago. Plenty to discuss between now and 7, lots of ways to discuss it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I can see the phones going already. Let me know your opinion on anything we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Let's get started here on Talk Drive. Well, of course, we're hearing about the victims, we're hearing about the people still in hospital, we're hearing about the alleged perpetrator as well. Charges have been brought, and I don't want to prejudice the trial any more than I'm sure many people, well, everybody at home wants to if a trial actually happens, but charges have been brought, and we know that Anthony Williams, who's 32 years old from Peterborough, has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of actual bodily harm and 1 count of possession of a bladed article. That is according to British Transport Police. They said that this morning. On the issue of safety on trains and the transport system in general, well, the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander spoke to the BBC this morning about the bravery of transport staff.
I would like to pay tribute to the response of the emergency services, but also the passengers who were on board that service. I can't begin to imagine what it would have been like to have been on that train, but also the response of the railway staff. The train driver who had the presence of mind to phone the signallers in Network Rail and get the train onto that slow line into Huntingdon Station and a place of safety, but also the individual that you referred to there, Sally, who is a member of the LNER onboard train crew. He is in hospital in a critical but stable condition, and the bravery that he showed was utterly remarkable.
Heidi Alexander there, the Transport Secretary. She is going to be speaking in the House of Commons. We think in about half an hour's time we will bring her statement to you. Of course, there will be so many things that she can't say because charges have been brought on. We're going to be careful about that too. We're going to be responsible, but we're also going to discuss the issue of railway safety. It is a big, big issue, and one man who knows an awful lot about it is Mike Neville, the former Metropolitan Police detective. Mike, it's good to talk to you. I just wonder what your hopes are, as someone who's dealt with a lot of crime on trains, for a review of rail safety in the UK following what happened at the weekend.
Well, my expertise, Peter, was sort of catching criminals with images, and of course the CCTV on trains is exceptional, and the railway stations all over that. But I heard Heidi Alexander speak, and she's promised, we'll have more CCTV and we'll have more facial recognition. Of course, these things do not stop an evil person who's intent on causing harm, or somebody who's mentally disturbed. They don't stop them. Of course, it just records them. It may put off somebody who is rational, who thinks I'm not going to commit a crime here because I'll be caught on camera. The other issue as well is even the British Transport Police do not have proper systems to deal with the CCTV. They've started to link various criminals to different cases, but they don't have a standard procedure of doing that. So whilst the police across the country have a fingerprint and DNA database, they don't have a method of dealing with images. And that's something that the police need to sort out. In addition to this, people have been calling for sort of airport-style security, and you'll have been on the Eurostar, I've been on the Eurostar, and that's a train where you have sort of airport.
Yeah, it takes ages to get through, though. You've got to be there. You've got to be there.
How could you apply that to, my journey from Stoke to London, or wherever?
And also, Mike, within that, not everybody boards at a big station. Often there are kind of what I sometimes call kind of hole in the hedge stations, small stations where you can buy a ticket from a machine. They aren't usually staffed. You go into a train, you maybe get out at another station like that because it suits you. I mean, we're not going to have the staff or the kind of airport style security for all of that. So that's unrealistic, isn't it?
Of course, it's unrealistic, and people are calling for that, and it's never going to happen. But what we could do is crack down on offending on the trains. Like, for example, during the time that Sadiq Khan has been in charge of London and in control, say, for example, of the Tube, the level of crime has gone from 11,000 reported offences to over 23,000. And there's just a feeling of lawlessness. You know as well as I do, you go on the Tube and people barge by you and don't pay their fare. And it's this sort of idea of broken windows. If you allow people to do little things on the Tube, then you get an increase. A quarter of that 23,000 offences are violent offences. We should all feel safe when we get on public transport, particularly women. So we've allowed these things to go on. So one of the ways we can crack down is to deal with the smaller matters, deal with things like CCTV properly, because too many people are caught on camera doing sexual assaults, other assaults, thieving, pickpocketing, and they're never really captured. Yeah. That could be tuned up. And then we could give the police the confidence. So, for example, our police officers are frightened to death of stop and search because they've been accused of being racist. Mm-hmm. And you get reports like Baroness Casey saying the police are racist. I've looked at the last 10 serious stabbings where 3 or more people were stabbed, and this is there's not that many of them, thankfully, but this is from 2023 to 2025, 10 incidents. Of those 10 incidents, only 2 of the suspects were white. One was in Cornwall and one was in Hampshire, and so six of the 10 were black suspects. Now, the police cannot help who commits crime, and we've got to give our officers the confidence that they do stop and search people. We've got to be honest about who commits crime, and we've got to give those officers the confidence that some malicious allegation of racism is not going to lead to them losing their jobs. We all need to feel safe on those trains, whether we're white, black, Asian, or whatever we are, and our police officers need the confidence to know that we're supporting them.
Tell me about facial recognition and how that could help. I know this is a drum you've been banging for some time. Are we finally getting to a stage where facial recognition could be used on the trains and indeed elsewhere as well? Lots of people getting in touch saying it's not just about the trains, they feel there's lawlessness everywhere in our society. What do you think about facial recognition and how it could be used? Because some people worry from a civil liberty perspective. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes we don't want to live in a society where we're checked on all the time. But it's right when things happen and they're very serious that we do use things like facial recognition on things like at railway stations, other transport hubs, where things may go wrong. We get used to it at airports. We use it with our passport. But the key thing is these things are a system. They're not a magic bullet, a silver bullet. So, for example, when the facial recognition shows a possible suspect, you put a group of people on there. These people are very violent. These people are terrorists. These people are child molesters, whatever. It comes up not with one face. It's not like some kind of device off Hollywood. It comes up with a selection of faces who may be that person. Mm-hmm. And what the police do is just put any random officer to make that selection. Well, my whole life was about, finding human super recognizers. They're the best people. So why aren't the police using the best people to pick out the right individuals? Because, again, the Met have been taken to court at London Bridge because some innocent black guy was a youth worker arrested because he was suspected of being a robber or something of facial recognition, as it wasn't him. So if they use the right people to operate it, if they make sure that when people are picked out afterwards on facial recognition that they actually take action, and the government measured the use of CCTV and facial recognition like they measured the use of fingerprints and DNA, then it might work. But none of these things is the solution in itself. It's a solution if it's part of a big system to make sure that we're all safe. And at the moment it isn't. It's amateurish. The police do not use images and CCTV efficiently.
Mike, thank you. That is Mike Neville there, former Metropolitan Police detective. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Tad in Cambridge, who says this Labour government will not accept their responsibility by not doing everything humanly possible to combat crime. It amounts to a dereliction of their duty and culpability on the part of the state, over which they presently have tenure. We cannot continue to let them off the hook, says Tad. This isn't about real safety, says Jane. It's about safety across the board. Many don't feel safe walking in their own street anymore and never go out. Paul says, well, actually, I'll come to that in just a second, actually, because there are a lot of people getting in touch about Reform UK. I'm going to read that in a second. But Keith in Shrewsbury, or Shrewsbury, depending on how you pronounce it, says, we've just returned from a week in the Sorrento area and used the train most days. At every single station, we used to simply couldn't get anywhere near a platform without a ticket, as the barriers were floor to ceiling and impossible to jump or break through. It's obvious our train companies are just concerned about profit, making it impossible to stop people without a ticket getting on to a train. Lots as well on the fact that Reform UK has been criticised by an education provider, Orion it is called, and they're teaching children in schools about Reform UK, calling them far right and saying that people shouldn't use media outlets like The Sun, for example, but they should go to, as they put it, trusted media outlets like, guess who, The Guardian and the BBC. Well, a lot of people getting in touch about that. Paul in Manchester says, good afternoon, Peter. Young minds are being tainted by political steering. Teachers need to teach young children about the history of our once great country, not the political satire that is happening now. And Jane says, at this stage, I think it's too early to give who would be in a Reform government. However, I would like to see Labour politicians to tell us what they're going to do. They're in power and not doing a good job. Well, certainly we will find out in 23 days from Rachel Reeves what the economy looks like and what she's going to do about it. So we'll take many, many more comments about that, of course, as time goes on. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I just want to tell you as well that coming up, will be after the budget from Monday the 1st of December, our talkTV app is on the move. All of your favourite shows and podcasts are going to continue over on the Talk app. So not the talkTV app, but the Talk app. So if you're watching or listening on the talkTV app right now, you're going to need to download another app. Only takes a couple of minutes. Download the Talk app from the App Store or Google Play. If you do it now, get it done, get it out of the way. And it's working. The new one is working right now. It's the Talk app. We've got a new app, but you've got to download it. It's called the Talk app. not the talkTV app. I'm going to do that. In fact, do you know what? I'm going to do it in the break right now because I have the talkTV app on my phone. I'll take it off and put the Talk app on it. Lots more to discuss. We will talk in just a second about what Nigel Farage has been saying. A board member of Reform UK, Dan Barker, is going to join us about the economic plans of Reform UK. What do you think? Were you listening to Farage earlier today? We'll play a little bit of a clip of what he was saying. I'd love your reaction too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I was back in the UK for only 5 days last week, and during that time there were 3 absolute horrors. There was the unbelievable bloody stabbing of an innocent dog walker. There was a court case about another horrific crime that all came to a conclusion that involved an asylum seeking related incident, and now we have this, which happened as I was flying out of the country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Right, I've done it during the course of the break. I've managed to get rid of the old app and put the new Talk app on my phone. There's some fat bloke called Peter Cardwell on at the moment, apparently, on Talk, so it's on my phone. It's done. Took me a couple of minutes. I'm a complete technophobe. They don't allow me near any buttons here as I'm an arts graduate, so that is on my phone now. It can be done very, very easily. So that's about deleting the talkTV app, put on the Talk app. I've done it. You can too, and continue watching and listening to all your favourite presenters and all the content and podcasts and all the rest of it here on Talk. So you can download the Talk app. You've got to do it by the Monday, the 1st of December. Just get it done now, because you'll be thinking about Christmas by that stage and you'll have other things to do. Lots of people have been in touch about railway safety. Someone in Cardiff who is a Transport for Wales staff says name withheld. Transport for Wales staff in Cardiff. That's absolutely fine. Totally understand your position about not telling us your name on this occasion. Railway security, particularly the British Transport Police's visible presence, is highly inconsistent. It is common to see no officers at the station for an entire weekend, contrasting sharply with the 3 or 4 who might appear on a random weekday. The unreliable coverage forces railway staff to bypass British Transport Police entirely and contact their local police force for assistance. So that's really, really interesting, hearing the real life experience of someone who is from Transport for Wales staff. So thank you for that. Happy to read that out. Dan's in Liverpool and has some thoughts on this. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Dan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, first I would like to say I'm looking at a very handsome man on talkTV right now.
Oh, you. Oh, good. My goodness, Dan. The fiver's in the post. The fiver's in the post. What would you like to say about railway safety?
So my main job, I work in security with telecoms company, and I've been talking to a number of people that I know and family members, and a lot of people are getting very concerned and even considering arming themselves for protection. And I explained to them, you can't arm yourself in the UK. At most, I would say, legally, you're allowed to have an umbrella. That is the only thing I can say legally to people. But apart from that, I'm thinking about what Peter Blexley also says as well, who you know from the show.
Yeah, of course. I've interviewed him many times, yeah.
And what is going to happen when public trust hits zero and people are getting scared?
I mean, I don't know about you, Dan. I don't want to live in a society where people are carrying around guns. I just don't want that. I grew up in a society where people carried around guns in Northern Ireland, and I don't want it to be part of my life anymore. I want there to be peace and security, and people to feel safe when they do something really straightforward, like going on a train journey.
We should feel safe with 100%. And there was something that Jeremy Powell said earlier this morning, where he was talking about the police releasing the information of this person, and they said it's because of what's happening in Southport, and he said something didn't feel right. Now, my full name is Denis Mohammed Razar, so obviously you can tell I come from a Muslim type background.
Okay.
And it almost feels bad. I'm trying to think how to put this in a very polite way. Do the police feel like because it wasn't someone of my ethnicity as well, they could come out quicker and say it? I don't want to stigmatise the police, but I've lost so much faith in them myself.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have lost faith in the police as well, and that is a very, very difficult thing. We need to get that trust back. Dan, I've got to move on, but thank you, Dan in Liverpool there. I want to talk to another Dan, actually, Dan Barker, board member of Reform UK. We'll come to him in just a second, because earlier the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, set out his party's economic plan.
So let me make it clear. I want as many high-earning people as possible living in this country and paying as much tax as they legally have to. Because if the rich leave and the rich don't pay tax, then the poorer in society will all have to pay more tax. It's as simple as that, and what we're doing is crazy.
Nigel Farage speaking earlier. He also discussed how his party would, in his view, stimulate growth.
We will cut spending. We will encourage growth and entrepreneurship. We want to cut taxes, of course we do. But we understand substantial tax cuts, given the dire state of debt and our finances, are not realistic at this current moment in time.
Dan Barker is a board member of Reform UK. Dan, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
How do you think Nigel Farage and Reform UK more generally can convince people that they have a plan for the economy, especially as the last plan they had just over a year ago, the contract that they put forward, has basically been junked now?
Well, that manifesto, our contract with you, was for the 24 July election, and that was about setting our stall out as a party and saying these are the big ideas, this is the direction of travel, these are the things we'd like to do.
But your ideas are very different now. Is that contract null and void?
I think a lot of that stuff still stands. You know, we said we're going to be, you know, we're going to get rid of net zero. I think what today is, it's a recognition of reality in the dire state of the finances, and that you can't do anything unless you start to get the spending under control. Look at the modest welfare spending cut that Labour tried to put forward, and the backbenchers wouldn't let them do it. Well, that was, you know, it was a small percentage. We need something quite drastic. We need to cut back the welfare spending so that we can actually, in future, give the tax cuts that will stimulate growth.
You've said that you're going to cut £9 billion from the welfare plan. How are you going to do that?
I think from listening to the speech, he talked about the, in terms of the, I think it was the anxiety, people with minor anxiety who've been put on PIP payments, to have those reviewed and have all future cases to be done via a face-to-face interview. And I think the view was that you could get those down quite drastically.
£9 billion worth, Dan?
9 billion. I think it was over 4 or 5 years. Up to 2029.
It's a big claim. Let me ask you about council homes, because council house building, Farage said, it would be the biggest council house building programme ever. How much would that cost, and how would it be funded?
I don't think that was included in the press release today. Was it?
It was in the speech. It was in the speech.
Oh right. I didn't catch that part.
Okay, well, it's a pledge that Nigel Farage has put forward. So how much would it cost, and how would he fund it?
Well, in terms of funding new builds, council homes, then I think our policies will be to fund it with saving cuts, you know, welfare cuts.
So the £9 billion that you've saved from welfare cuts is going to pay for the council homes that you're going to build. Is that correct?
Well, we're not just talking about take one over here and give it to those. We're talking about bringing down the welfare bill drastically across the piece.
Okay,
by shrinking the state.
Okay, if you bring it down by £9 billion from welfare alone, are there other areas you're going to cut the public spending in?
Well, welfare is now, I think it's forecast to go about £100 billion a year. If it's not currently that already.
Okay, so is £9 billion going to cover everything you want to pay for, including tax cuts, or not?
No, £9 billion is a start, Peter. So it's just identifying the area where there's been overdiagnosis of anxiety that's put people on PIPs, and said this is an area where people who can and should be working should be put back to work.
So how is £9 billion going to fix the economy when the current black hole is anything between £20 and £40 billion?
Well, we didn't say that $9 billion was going to fix the economy. We said that was an area. He gave that as an example of an area.
Okay, so what is the total of cuts that you're going to implement? What is the total number that you're going to cut?
So the speech today was to set out the macroeconomic picture. It wasn't to present a balanced budget of here's
well, you've given the £9 billion. You've given the £9 billion figure. I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave this, Dan, because Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has started speaking in the House of Commons. This is thank you to Dan Barker, board member of Reform UK. We've got to go to the House of Commons. Shabana Mahmood.
Line on Saturday evening. I am sure I speak for everyone in this House when I say that my thoughts today are first and foremost with the victims, with their family and their friends, and all those who experienced this terrifying attack. My deepest thanks go to the emergency services, the British Transport Police, Cambridgeshire Police, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue, and the East of England Ambulance Service. The speed of their response, as well as their skill and professionalism, were exemplary. I would also like to pay tribute to the breathtaking bravery of those on the train itself, including the heroic acts of the passengers and train crew who intercepted the attacker. I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time, and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be. Mr. Speaker, there is now a live investigation into what happened on Saturday night and the events that led up to it. I am therefore limited in what I can say today without putting successful prosecution at risk, and I am sure that all here agree that there must be one priority right now, and that is bringing the person who committed this horrific crime to justice. However, I will share what facts I can. At 7:42 p.m. on Saturday evening, police were contacted about an incident on a train travelling from Doncaster to London, with reports of several stabbings on board. The quick thinking of the driver saw the train diverted to Huntingdon Station. Within 8 minutes of the first 999 call, police had boarded the train and brought the attack to an end. 10 people were taken to hospital by the ambulance services, 8 of whom had life-threatening injuries. A further individual later self-presented at the hospital. 3 people have now been discharged, whilst 8 remain in hospital. I know that everyone in this House wishes them the swiftest and fullest recoveries possible. And I would like to thank the staff at Cambridge University Hospital for their life-saving care. I can confirm, as was reported over the weekend, that Operation Plato, the national police identifier for a terrorist attack, was declared. However, it was rescinded once the incident had been contained. The British Transport Police remain the lead force in this investigation. They stated yesterday that while counter-terrorism policing were initially involved, they have found, and I quote, nothing to suggest that this was a terrorist incident. At the scene, the police made 2 arrests. Since then, 1 man has been released who we now know was not involved. As of this morning, the other, one Anthony Williams, has been charged. In relation to the events in Huntingdon, he has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of possession of a knife, and 1 of actual bodily harm. He has also been charged with a further count of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article in relation to events on a Docklands Light Railway train in the early hours of Saturday morning at London's Pontoon Dock. And Cambridgeshire Police have, in the last few hours, reported additional earlier sightings and possible further offences. As is standard practice in these cases, they have now referred themselves to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, the IOPC, for independent scrutiny of their handling of these reports. For now, there is little I can say about this man and his past, beyond confirming that he is a British national and was born in this country, and that he was not known to the security services, counter-terror policing, or Prevent. I know this House and the public will have many unanswered questions today about who this attacker was and about the events that led up to the attack. Those questions will be answered, but it will take time. The police and prosecutors must be allowed to do their work. Since Saturday's attack, the British Transport Police have increased their presence at key points in the transport network, though it should be noted that their operational assessment of the risk posed on our trains has not changed, as this was an isolated attack. It was also, of course, a knife crime. This government is committed to halving knife crime within a decade, and progress has been made this year. We have taken 60,000 knives off of our streets, banned zombie knives and ninja swords, and seen a 5% fall in all knife crimes, including an 18% reduction in homicides by knife. I know that ideas have already been suggested about how policing should change in response to this event. Once the facts are known, we must examine what more might have been done to stop this horrific attack from ever occurring, and whether there are measures that we must now take to better protect the public on our streets and on our trains. However, that must be done when all of the facts are available to us. Madam Deputy Speaker, the thoughts of the whole House are today with the victims of this horrific crime, their families and their friends, and all affected by what happened on Saturday night. The sickening act of the man who committed this crime was the very worst of humanity. but the actions of those who responded, who ran towards danger to save the lives of people they did not know, was the very best of us. I know we all share in paying tribute to their extraordinary bravery today, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Chris Philp.
Chris Philp now from the Conservatives.
Speaker, I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Our thoughts are with the victims of this appalling attack and their families, as the Home Secretary quite rightly said. I join her in paying tribute to the emergency services who responded so fast, and to the brave interventions by members of the public and the train staff that prevented an even worse tragedy from occurring. They are truly heroes. This attack has horrified and shocked the whole nation. People simply travelling by train were indiscriminately attacked. The horror the passengers experienced will likely stay with them forever. Anthony Williams has now been charged. As the Home Secretary said, he had been involved in previous incidents in Peterborough and in the early hours of Saturday morning was also allegedly involved in an attack on the Docklands Right Railway in London. Will she confirm, as I've been told, that police in London knew Williams' identity following that? And if so, were Cambridgeshire police informed so they could track him down? In essence, I'm asking, were there any opportunities to have prevented this from occurring? The Home Secretary said that Williams was not previously known to the security services, counter-terrorism policing or Prevent. Can she also tell the House if Williams was previously known to the police more widely or to mental health services? Mr. Speaker, this all comes just weeks after a murderous Islamist terror attack on a Manchester synagogue and just days after the horrendous murder of Wayne Broadhurst by an Afghan asylum seeker, both using knives. Although homicide has thankfully fallen by about 15% since 2010, and as the Home Secretary said, knife crime has fallen in recent years, every homicide and every knife attack is one too many. I saw, together with the Police Minister, the grief this causes at the funeral of a 15-year-old girl, Eliane Andam, murdered in Croydon just over 2 years ago. So, speaking in general, not in relation to this incident, does the Home Secretary agree that knife crime and knife homicide are still too high and we must do yet more? Does she agree that more knife crime offenders should go to jail? This is important because when offenders are in jail, they of course can't attack the public. Does she agree we need to ensure more people who carry knives, especially where they use them to threaten others, are jailed? I know of course there are pressure on prison places, but by deporting more of the 10,000 foreign nationals in prison, we could create more space. Madam Deputy Speaker, we also need to take more knives off our streets, and that means we have to dramatically increase the use of stop and search. A study this year by Professor Lawrence Sherman, the Met's former Chief Scientific Officer, found that raising stop and search levels in London to 2011 levels would lead to a 1/3 reduction in knife homicide. Some people complain that stop and search is used disproportionately in relation to some groups, but when measured in relation to the offending population, the disproportionality disappears, as set out by a recent policy exchange study. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we should triple the use of stop and search to get knives off our streets and introduce year-round surge policing in the top 5% of high crime hotspots, which will of course include many train stations. We must also use technology more. There is work underway at the Home Office, which I know about, to develop technology to scan for knives at a distance, which it is hoped can distinguish knives from keys or mobile phones. And this, of course, could help police rapidly identify those carrying a knife in a public place. I wonder if the Home Secretary could provide an update on that development work, either straight away or, if you prefer, perhaps in writing later, because I really do think it could make a big difference. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, retrospective and live facial recognition can also identify wanted criminals, including those involved in knife crime. In Croydon Town Centre, the borough which the Police Minister and I represent in Parliament, in the last couple of years, around 200 wanted criminals, including 2 wanted rapists and others guilty of knife crime, who would not otherwise have been caught, were arrested using live facial recognition, and crime in Croydon Town Centre, including knife crime, has gone down as a result. The images of innocent passers-by are immediately and automatically deleted, addressing civil liberties concerns. So I really do hope the Home Secretary agrees and the Police Minister agrees that rolling out this technology nationally will have a dramatic impact on improving public safety, and they will certainly have my full support if they choose to do that. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know everyone in this House wants to see knife crime eradicated, more today, I'm sure, than ever before. So I hope the House will also support the tough steps needed to eradicate knife crime, because we owe the victims of these appalling crimes actions as well as words.
Secretary.
Home Secretary now to reply to that.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Shadow Home Secretary for his remarks and in particular as he opened his response. I know that the bravery of all of those who faced this attack on Saturday is something that has unanimous support across this House, and I thank him for the spirit in which he reflected that. He will know in relation, as I said in my opening statement, in relation to the events in Peterborough, they are now the subject of an IOPC investigation. It's important that I don't say anything that seeks to get ahead of that, but I'm sure all of those questions will be answered in the fullness of time, and it is standard practice where there has been contact with police in the run-up to an event like this that those matters are referred to the IOPC to investigate and consider. He'll also know that I can't say anything in relation to the suspect who's been charged and any prior history or indeed any mental health issues, because that would also be facts that are material to any future court proceedings, and it would be inappropriate for me or indeed anybody else in this House to comment or speculate on those matters today. And I would just ask that the words of the Speaker at the opening of this part of our session are remembered as we pose questions today. I agree with him that knife crime is far too high. This government is impatient to do everything it can to eliminate knife crime. It's why we've set ourselves an ambitious target, and we're pleased to have made some progress, though I agree with him that there is still much more to be done. And I hope on knife crime in particular, instead of playing politics across this House, where there is consensus, we are all able to work together in the spirit of trying to bring down the scourge of knife crime in our country. As I say, the numbers have gone in a positive direction, and I hope he will welcome that and work with us as we seek to make more progress. He referred to sentencing in particular. I do have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's disappointing when members opposite do not reckon with the scale of the crisis in our prison system. This government inherited a prison system on the brink of collapse. It has meant difficult decisions ever since we have entered office in order to prevent this country from running out of prison places entirely. He will know that this government has deported more foreign national offenders since our term of office than was the case in the previous record under the previous government. Despite deporting record numbers of foreign national offenders, the scale of crisis in the prison system means that there are still more prisoners coming into the system than there have been places, and it is important, therefore, that the sentencing reforms are seen in that context. He will know, though, that it is the case that those who are in possession of a knife and who have been using that in a threatening manner do attract, the majority of those people do attract reasonably lengthy prison sentences. When we know more about the circumstances of this particular case, we will know if there are other lessons for us to draw and other areas of policy for us to consider. He referenced stop and search and he, I think, lamented the issues around disproportionality. I hope I'm not putting too much of a spin on his remarks. I would just gently remind him it was a former Tory Home Secretary in the first 2010 to 15 Parliament that started speaking about disproportionate use of stop and search powers and changed the rules around stop and search to reflect the disproportionate use of that power of the previous government. But I hope he will recognise that the police already have the power to use stop and search where the intelligence suggests that that is required. That is an operational decision for police chiefs. And of course, the decision as to whether to stop and search someone where there are reasonable grounds and suspicion is an individual operational decision for individual police officers. This is a well-used power. It is a well-understood power. It is an important power that is in our arsenal for tackling criminality, and this government fully supports its lawful use.
Shabana Mahmood there, the Home Secretary, replying to the Shadow Home Secretary. Will bring you anything significant more that happens in the House of Commons during this statement. It's probably going to take about an hour. Lots of different MPs are going to ask questions about what happened, who knew what when, essentially, and also what is going to happen about safety on our trains and just the safety of the nation. Nick in Winchester has already reacted to what Shabana Mahmood was saying there. Was the Home Secretary's speech written by AI? Predictable platitudes that we've heard over and over again. What are we going to do to stop it? At least the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, asked the right question with a return to stop and search being a priority, says Nick in Winchester. Jane says, we don't want thoughts and prayers every time there is an incident. We want to live in a safe country. We don't want to live in fear. Mark in Croydon says, I just saw British Transport Police at Victoria Tube Station, not wanting to appear rude, but the two officers didn't make me feel any safer. Short, overweight and hardly likely to deter or prevent much. If it all kicked off, better looking after myself, he says. Also, James has been in touch. I've been a train driver for over 10 years, James says, and I'm also ex-military. I'm astonished at the lack of security measures in place for trains. I've always been surprised that terrorists hadn't targeted mainline trains due to the ease at which an attack could be carried out and the sheer carnage that could be inflicted on passengers. It was by the grace of God that there happened to be a mainline station within reasonable distance from when the attack commenced and which was within close proximity of the relevant emergency service. This is seldom the case on the railway. We need airport-style security scanners at the railway stations and a stronger security presence on trains. Otherwise, I feel that attacks like these could become the norm. Well, I certainly hope they won't be the norm, James. How realistic is it, though, James, to say you're going to scan every single person who gets on a train? What about those smaller stations? Would it only be at mainline stations? Well, then would a terrorist not just get on, or an attacker of some description, not just get on at a smaller station where there wouldn't be those kind of safety measures? James, I'm going to ask the producer, Ryan, to look out. If you can answer those questions, if you have any further thoughts, I'm really interested in what you, all our viewers and listeners have to say, but particularly you, James, because of your experience. I'm just asking my producer, Ryan, to look out. If you send in another message between now and 7 o'clock, we will try our very best to spot it, and Ryan will get me to read it out, because I'd love your further thoughts on how security can happen. And actually, if you're going at a small station, how is it realistic, especially on a local train, if someone gets on at a smaller station? Well, how is it realistic, and do we just need to throw a huge amount of money at this problem? Also, the kind of society that we live in, that's another big issue, and it's an issue actually in regard to diversity. That's something that has been asked of the public. There's a survey out. This is by the National Centre for Social Research, and they have found that less than half of the British public, 49%, feel that diversity strengthens society. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I want to talk to Matthew Hulbert, the political commentator, about that in just a minute. I also want your views on it, so stay with us here on Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch, including Jenny and Bester, who says, "Dear Lord, the Reform Board member was dire, incoherent, rambling, not across his or any brief. Don't know what was said at the press conference, not a good look." Anna in Surrey says, "I would happily pay another 10p in the pound for tax if Reform UK take control and do everything they promised." We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about Farage as well. Someone says how refreshing to hear him speaking. He comes across as level-headed, grown up, with the ability to save the country from complete ruin. That is Amanda in London. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about public transport and safety as well in just a few minutes' time. But I want to talk now about 49% of the British public who feels that diversity strengthens society. What do you think? Do you think diversity strengthens society compared to 64% of Americans? So less than half of people think that. Also 42% of people in the UK think there should be legal efforts to deport immigrants living here without permission. This is a big new survey by the National Centre for Social Research. Quite a number of different findings on it. I also found an interesting one that 59% of people in the UK think same-sex marriage being legal is good for society. Presumably 41% either don't think that or don't know. So we will probe all that with Matthew Hulbert, political commentator, who is with me now. Matthew, what do you think of the fact that less than half of people in Britain think that diversity strengthens society?
Hi Peter, great to be with you this afternoon. Well, I wonder what they think when they hear the word diversity, because for me it's absolutely a positive. You know, I think that our diversity is our greatest strength, and I sometimes wonder, Peter, if people somehow want to go back to some 1950s style kind of idyllic situation, which I don't think ever really actually existed in the first place, where everyone looked and sounded exactly the same. I wouldn't want to live in a country like that. Diversity is a strength.
I wouldn't necessarily want to live in a country like that either, and I think what I think we know, because it's been clear a lot of the time, is that there are people who have the values of this country and there are people who don't have the values of this country. I hope I'm not racist, I hope I'm not homophobic, I hope I'm not anti anything really. I definitely have strong views on a number of different issues, as you know, Matthew, but I suppose the point is that many people say, here are standards, here are things that we want to happen in our country, and there are a lot of people, including many immigrants, who are coming here who don't fit in, who don't embrace British values, and that, I would imagine, is where a lot of this is coming from.
Well, I mean, what I'd say to that is, you know, I'm a liberal and I don't believe in conformity, and you know, people should abide by laws. Of course they should, but beyond that, you know, I'm not much fussed if the way they live their lives is not how we consider to be how we want to live ours. I'd hate to live in that kind of conformist society. And I was thinking there, Peter, during the adverts that you know, I know you recently had on a certain Reform MP who has an issue with diversity, perhaps on our screens. I don't. When I see different faces, different kinds of people, different kinds of couples, different kinds of human beings, I celebrate that. I think that's a great good.
So there are things you've just said there, that there are things that are legal. It is perfectly legal, for example, to have situations where we have, for example, in the Muslim faith, where women don't have a leading role, but men do, and often they can't be in the same places as men. That to me is something that is a problem, but it's not a problem to you because it's legal and people should be allowed to do what they want.
Well, it's a problem for me in as much as I obviously wouldn't agree with that. I absolutely believe in the empowerment of women, and can I say, I mean all women, including trans women. And so, of course, I wouldn't want to see a situation like that. And, you know, as a liberal, as a Democrat, I'd argue against that. So I think we don't have to agree with everything. We can argue against it without wanting it necessarily to be made illegal, or even if it is made illegal, to argue against it in a way which isn't arguing against the point, but which makes it sound as if you're arguing against the race of that person.
So I'm not arguing against the race of anyone, I'm not arguing against their faith necessarily, but there are clearly people who express legally held views, for example, that are views that are not British views, are not are not British values. They are British views because those people are British, many of them certainly. But we're in a situation where that diversity and that to many people, they feel that is a problem. So what would you say to people, for example, the 42% of people in the UK think there should be legal efforts to deport immigrants here living without permission?
Well, me and you have talked about this a lot, Peter. You know, I'm fairly liberal on immigration. I think immigration is a good thing to our society. And, you know, as I've said to you before, and we've had many arguments about this, if there were more safe and legal routes, not so many people would be taken to the seas, the dangerous seas, and trying to get into the country illegally.
But are you happy to say that it's a diverse point to have people who may or may not be legally here, who may or may not be rightfully here in our society, because that's a diverse point and you're happy with that diversity?
Well, you can hold two views at the same time. Do I think that they should be in a situation where they're coming here illegally? No, I don't. But if they're genuine, and if they're genuinely seeking asylum, for example, there should be more safe and legal routes for them. You can hold both of those views at the same time, and I do.
So if they're not here legally, what should happen?
Well, there should be a process. May well see them returned, but again, I'd say that should be a compassionate process that every single one of these individuals is actually a human being.
So even if you're making it up, and you're saying that you're oppressed and you're fleeing a war-torn area, but you're not, we should show those people compassion.
Well, I think I've just said, Peter, that there should be a process, but it should be, you know, a compassionate process.
So we should be compassionate to people who are lying to us.
Peter, it should also be hard-headed. Again, you can be both at the same
compassionate
time.
And hard-headed.
Yeah, you absolutely can be that. You can treat people as... Peter, let me ask you, would you not want every human being to be treated as a human being? You would want that, wouldn't you?
Yes, but that can mean lots of different things. Matthew, we'll leave it there. Appreciate your time. Matthew Hulbert, the political commentator. What do you think about diversity? Is it our strength here in the UK? What do you think about what Matthew said there? You can give us a ring, 0344 499 1000. On the other side of the news, we'll talk more about transport safety. We'll be speaking to a big rail union as well and getting their thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company. We'll be reflecting on the words of the Home Secretary in the last half an hour. That's still going on in the House of Commons. She's answering questions on the attack that happened over the weekend. We know that charges have been brought, so we'll be careful what we say. We'll also speak to the TSSA, the Union for Transport and Travel Workers, very, very soon. We'll reflect on what the Home Secretary and indeed Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp have been saying. We'll also talk about sport this hour as well. We'll talk about a story that's really concerning about Reform UK's policies have been compared to fascism by a group of schools. We'll also talk about the former SAS soldiers who are condemning Labour's new Troubles bill. This is about prosecuting people from the Troubles way back when in Northern Ireland. Mark Francois, the Conservative MP, is going to join us on that. He's an important voice, but you're an even more important voice. I want to make sure I get as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes here on the programme between now and 7 o'clock. You're very welcome to send them in and to give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll play those out. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number. It's on the screen right now, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over. Let's get started here on Talk Drive. Well, in the last half an hour, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has spoken about the bravery of the staff on the train on Saturday night. This was in Huntingdonshire. We know that charges have been brought. She said what she could. She was asked many, many questions, certainly about that suspect that she couldn't answer, or decided not to answer. Certainly, Anthony Williams is 32 from Peterborough. He has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of actual bodily harm and 1 count of possession of a bladed article. British Transport Police have confirmed this morning. We will, of course, dip in and out of what the Home Secretary has said. We're keeping an ear across that, and if there's more that's significant, we'll bring it to you right here. But we're not going to play the whole thing because there's so much to discuss. But let's talk about, let's hear what she's been saying in the last half an hour in the House of Commons. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood.
I would also like to pay tribute to the breathtaking bravery of those on the train itself, including the heroic acts of the passengers and train crew who intercepted the attacker. I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be.
She also confirmed that the suspect, who has been charged, was not known to security services. Well, Danny Shaw is a police and crime and justice commentator. He's a former advisor to the former Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Danny, thank you for joining me today. We've obviously got those charges, and you know better than anyone how careful we need to be about that. But clearly the big issue of safety on our public transport network being debated, and rightly so, in Parliament at the moment. What do you make of what the Home Secretary, and indeed the Shadow Home Secretary and other MPs as well, have been saying in the last sort of half an hour, 40 minutes?
Well, I thought both Shabana Mahmood and Chris Philp were very measured in their comments and were mindful that there are legal proceedings now underway and that the suspect is facing charges not just in relation to this attack, but also in relation to an earlier incident in southeast London at Silvertown, where it's alleged he attempted to murder someone. And we know that Cambridgeshire Police are now also looking into incidents earlier in the day on Saturday and on the Friday evening, where a man was seen brandishing a knife, and in one case a 14-year-old boy was stabbed, though his injuries were not serious. So I think that all begs the question about the police response to the incident in London, what was happening in those 18 hours between that incident at Silvertown and the knife attack. Was that suspect identified? Were attempts made to locate him? That's a very serious stabbing. This isn't just a kind of routine punch up on a train station. This is obviously a very serious incident indeed, if it's led to an attempted murder charge. So I think some serious questions for the Met Police there, and also for Cambridgeshire Police about the efforts they made to track down and locate the suspect before it's alleged that he went on board that train. Now, I don't think either Chris Philp or Shabana Mahmood really addressed those points because they're very mindful of legal proceedings. But I think they talked about the wider issues of tackling knife crime. Shabana Mahmood saying there has been some positive progress on the figures, but knife crime is too high, absolutely too high. And Chris Philp calling for more stop and search in particular and greater use of technology.
And speaking about Chris Philp, we can take a look at what he said in response to the Home Secretary. This is within the last 40 minutes in the House of Commons.
Our thoughts are with the victims of this appalling attack and their families, as the Home Secretary quite rightly said. I join her in paying tribute to the emergency services who responded so fast, and to the brave interventions by members of the public and the train staff that prevented an even worse tragedy from occurring. They are truly heroes. This attack has horrified and shocked the whole nation. People simply travelling by train were indiscriminately attacked. The horror the passengers experienced will likely stay with them forever. Anthony Williams has now been charged. As the Home Secretary said, he had been involved in previous incidents in Peterborough, and in the early hours of Saturday morning was also allegedly involved in an attack on the Docklands Right Railway in London. Will she confirm, as I've been told, that police in London knew Williams' identity following that? And if so, were Cambridgeshire Police informed so they could track him down? In essence, I'm asking, were there any opportunities to have prevented this from occurring?
And Danny, that speaks to what you've been saying just a few minutes ago, but Shabana Mahmood essentially said she wasn't going to answer those questions because they come out in the fullness of time. Was she right to do so, or do you think there's more information she could have given in the House of Commons on this?
I'm sure the briefings that the Home Secretary has had go well beyond the information that she imparted on the floor of the House of Commons.
Of course, yeah.
I'm pretty sure, as you will know, Peter, that ministers are privy to a lot of information. But I think she's right not to get into that. But I think that doesn't mean that the Met Police hasn't got some questions to answer. If Chris Philp is right, and I'm sure for him to say that, he must be fairly confident that police in London knew the identity of the suspect in that earlier attack in Silvertown in southeast London. Remember that this happened in the early hours of Saturday morning, and then the train attack happened at around about 7:30 p.m. So there's a lot of time. If the Met Police did know the identity of this person, to make attempts to track him down, were other police forces informed? And I think we need to get some more clarity on that, definitely.
Thank you, Danny. We will return to that. There are lots of unanswered questions here. I want to talk now to Tina McKay. Tina is a TSSA union organiser. TSSA, of course, the independent trade union for the transport and travel industries. Tina, thanks for your time this afternoon. Tell me from your perspective how your members are feeling at the moment, especially those who are working on trains, who have seen the horrific attack that's happened over the weekend. And I know that you have campaigned, in fact, way before this, back in September 2024, you were campaigning for better safety on trains. Do you think you're going to be listened to properly now?
Well, I'd just like to say that first and foremost, our thoughts are with the victims and the families and all who were affected by this incident that did occur. Yes, you are right that TSSA has been campaigning on not just safety, but we've been actually trying to campaign as well on increasing funding for British Transport Police. What we've been trying to look at have been preventative measures. We've been calling out the risks that our members have been facing on a daily basis. Just earlier this year, we launched a report on violence against transport workers. And some of the statistics that we came across were just eye-watering. The amount of abuse that people are contending with on a daily basis is just unacceptable. And it's really sad when you listen to to what people are saying, which is that it's becoming so commonplace that it's just something that they take on the chin, and nobody should have to contend with any sort of abuse at work. But when you're starting to see such appalling levels of violence and people being attacked with weapons, racial harassment, sexual abuse, all sorts of unacceptable behaviour that staff are contending with, it's just really unacceptable, and more does need to be
and it is
done.
unacceptable, as you say. What do you think it says that it takes an incident like this for, yes, us in the media, we're guilty of it too, of not talking about it properly. We're probably guilty of being a bit sniffy about train drivers earning lots of money, the ASLEF ones who negotiated that settlement. What do you think it says that actually for the government, the authorities, the police to sit up and take notice of this, it takes an attack of this type?
Well, I can't comment on what the government and the police and the media, what interests them or what motivates them. Our priority is making sure that the transport system is safe for both workers and for the passengers. And what I would say is we have long campaigned at TSSA for a fully funded, publicly owned transport system that is run for the people and not for profit. And we firmly believe that if people were put at the forefront of any sort of transport network, we would see a safer transport network.
Just on that note, sorry to interrupt you, Tina, but if safety is not improved, will you be looking at possible union action to make the government listen?
Well, I can't speak on what our members would be willing to do at this point, but I mean, it is something that is a key priority in the talks that we are having. And what we're really looking at is trying to get people to move from the reactive to the preventative. So fund British Transport Police more. Make sure that there's no funding shortfall, which we are seeing at the moment, which is actually risking jobs in British Transport Police, therefore making prevention a little bit less. So fund them properly, make sure that they can respond to incidents quickly and effectively. We also need tougher enforcement and real consequences for those who do intimidate or threaten transport workers and passengers. Just to highlight, there is actually a law that's specific for people who attack retail workers. We've been campaigning for a change to make sure that there's a specific one for people who are abusive and violent on the transport network. So we want to see that as well. But also what we want, we've also got demands as well of the train companies and transport providers to end things such as lone transport staffing. You know, that creates a vulnerability, and unstaffed stations provide conditions for intimidation and violence. A visible staffed presence is one that does deter. So let's create more of a safe network. Let's make sure that staff are safe and passengers are safe, and that we have a transport network that everybody wants to use.
Tina, I know you've got to go. Thank you for your time. That's Tina McKay there, who is from the TSSA union. She's a union organiser for them. Sean's in Basingstoke and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sean, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Peter. Yeah, I've been listening to the show all day, and obviously since that awful incident yesterday.
Yes.
Sorry, over the weekend.
Sure.
What I did, I dug up some figures from British Transport Police that I thought were quite alarming and add to the topic that you've just had, that conversation there. So let me just present these figures, and then obviously we can then look at whether those figures have gone down or up. But they are worrying nonetheless.
What stood out for you? What's the most worrying that you've seen?
So what we got is, so far this year, 2025, on the trains, 3,200 incidents, 510 involved knives or sharp objects, 220 of those incidents involved injuries, and 15 of those incidents were fatal. That's one, that's just too many. One is too many.
Yeah.
And, those are alarming figures. And listening to various conversations over the weekend saying, these figures are going down over time. They're not. There's still too many incidents out there. And if you want to quickly compare that to the schools, there's been 150 knife attacks this year in schools reported. And that's a Channel 4 fact check.
Yeah.
Again,
so 150 knife attacks in schools and 510 on the railways. Is that correct?
No. Sorry. Let me just go those figures there. So 3,200 violent incidents on the trains. 510 involved knives or sharp objects.
Knives or sharp objects. And then in schools, 150 with knife or sharp objects. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah, and one fatality, a 13-year-old girl. Obviously, you may have covered that earlier on in the year.
Thank you for bringing those to us, Sean, because honestly, they're really shocking statistics, and it does show that there are major things that we need to be talking about that maybe we aren't talking about properly. I really appreciate the call, Sean. Thank you. I know you're relatively new to the station in terms of ringing us. Ring me anytime, especially when you've got really interesting and useful information, horrifying information in regard to that. We also know that Cambridge Police has voluntarily referred itself to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, the IOPC, for independent scrutiny about the events leading up to what happened at Huntingdon. The referral was made during the force's identification of 3 prior knife-related incidents in Peterborough on Friday the 31st of October and then on Saturday morning that could potentially be linked to the suspect Anthony Williams. The force's referral to the Independent Office of Police Conduct was reportedly rejected as it didn't meet the threshold for a full independent investigation. But very interesting that certainly there's more to this. The police responded quickly. Within 8 minutes, they were, I think it was within 8 minutes they had the suspect in custody, and one other man who's since been released and had nothing to do with it. That was a mistake, but in good faith it was reported that he had, but he hadn't. But it's very interesting that we're getting a wider picture. Chris Philp in the House of Commons talking about that as well. Who knew what when? And in theory, could this have been prevented? Could this have been prevented? There's lots more to come on this. I also want to talk about Reform UK in just a second, because there's a schools group, the Orion Schools Group, which hasn't commented on this. It's been asked for comment by various media, and they haven't commented on it. They're comparing Reform UK's policies to fascism. Given what Zara Sultana said, given the debate we had on my shows on Friday and indeed on Saturday, are our young minds being brainwashed by this drivel? Stay with us here on Talk.
About 250 or so knife-enabled homicides a year. it's far too high. Now, there were reductions in police numbers after 2010 because of the financial mess the previous Labour government left behind, but when I was police minister in the last couple of years of the last government, we recruited a lot more police officers, and we actually left government a year and a half ago with record ever numbers of police. It was 149,769 on March the 31st, 2024. Unfortunately, since then, under Labour, it has started going down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Rich and Dudley. He says, regarding yet another attack on innocent people just going about their daily routine, I'm absolutely sick and tired of government mouthpieces gurgling the same old statements, saying the same old things and doing nothing. My wife used public transport, mainly buses, and after she came home night after night saying she felt really unsafe, I encouraged her to pass her driving test, which she did just to get off public transport. That was 15 years ago, Peter, says Rich and Dudley. He also paid me a lovely compliment I'm not going to read out, otherwise my head will explode. Jim in Cambridge says, Peter, I worked at Cambridge railway station for 14 years on the platform, dispatching trains. I've been punched, spat at, sworn at. British Transport Police were nowhere to be seen those days. I'm retired now, thank goodness. Jim, I'm sorry to hear that happen. I've been to Cambridge railway station loads of times. It's a lovely station, actually, and there's a lovely area as well, and I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that absolute hell. It just sounds dreadful. I want to talk now about Reform UK. Earlier on, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, spoke to us. He spoke to Jeremy on breakfast this morning. And this is a really interesting one because there is a group of schools under the Orion schools belt, as it were, who are comparing Reform UK's policies to fascism. It is a really, really worrying report. The Mail on Sunday had it yesterday. Richard was asked about this morning by Jeremy Kyle. This is what Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, said.
Truly, truly disgraceful. The whole point of teaching is you should be neutral. You should teach children to learn how to think and to give them a range of the different sort of spectrum. And this is just a completely, frankly, it's slanderous against me. Personally, I've written to the chief exec of this academy chain. He clearly knew nothing about it and has launched an investigation. But I'm pretty appalled, actually. And there was no mention in this document of the left-wing violence from the likes of the masked thugs, the Antifa bunch. No mention at all. Surprise, surprise.
So this is schools run by Orion Education. It is 8 academies in England where taught Reform UK's policies have been exploited by extremists to, as they put it, spread hate, xenophobia and racism and normalise far-right views. Richard Tice himself, who we just heard from there, was also pictured on a PowerPoint slide under the title, How Can Political Views Lead to Extremism? Teachers instructed students that that if they wanted news, if they wanted trusted news, they should use trusted sites like the BBC, The Guardian and Parliament.uk instead of sites such as The Sun, random blogs or YouTube channels. Newspapers such as the Daily Mail and The Sun often publish dramatic headlines about immigration, especially about small boat crossings in the English Channel, it said. These stories sometimes use words like flood or invasion, making migrants sound like a threat. This type of reporting can make people feel afraid or angry, which far-right groups then use to support their arguments. Now, Simon Garrell, who is the online Orion Education Chief Executive, says he has begun an investigation. But the fact is that this nonsense was shown to children in schools, and schools, as I think Chris McGovern, the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, is about to tell me, are meant to be politically neutral, aren't they, Chris?
Well, they are indeed. They should be politics-free zones. But Peter, I'm afraid that the lights are going out across our education system and young people are being led along some very sinister pathways. And I can well understand Richard Tice of Reform and indeed Nigel Farage being upset by this. But, you know, what's not being said, actually, by the reports is that it's why the whitewashing Adolf Hitler, because what they're saying here is that, no, Adolf Hitler, yeah, he may have started the World War, He may have gassed 6 million Jews. He may have bombed London and invaded Russia. But, you know, it wasn't much different from Richard Tice or Nigel Farage. So actually, you've got to almost say supporting fascism. So it's quite a double-edged thing, but it's extremely dangerous. And
it's insulting. And it's insulting to Jewish people because, and the many other groups that were targeted in the Holocaust, because it's essentially trivialising what happened back then, saying, oh yeah, Nigel Farage makes a speech and he's basically the same as all of this. It is really, really worrying that there are teachers in at least 8 academies in England that are teaching this guff.
And they have been doing for some time. This is a natural evolution of what's been going on. I remember talking to Margaret Thatcher many years ago, 30 years ago now, I suppose, and she said to me, Chris, you know, we've got a new national curriculum for history coming out, and it doesn't include World War I. Now, you and I are both wearing poppies because, you know, this is an important event. But even today, in the national curriculum for history, you don't have to teach World War I. You don't have to teach World War II. And our thick-skulled politicians need to open the document and understand that the key events of British history do not have to be taught. It's stated very specifically, you do not have to teach Churchill or World War II or World War I. You do not have to, but you do have to teach either Islamic history or West African history or Central American history or Chinese history or Indian history. They're compulsory. Now, nothing against those, but why not make World War I and World War II?
Well, you would imagine the history of our own country and the fact that we are the democracy that we are, the fact that we have the rules, the mores, the culture that we have now. You would imagine that would be something that, given that World War I was just over 100 years ago, that would be something you'd want to teach children in school.
Yeah, and Margaret Thatcher said to me, Chris, can you come round tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, to Downing Street to try and sort out the mess? And I was involved 3 times in rewriting the national curriculum. Each time I was a dissenting voice. Now, later this week, Peter, there's going to be a new version published. This time I haven't been invited to be a participant in writing it because they know my views and they don't like them. So I'm not too optimistic on that. But look, there are people in our schools, many teachers probably, who see the classroom as a vehicle for promoting ideology, and it's mostly left-wing ideology, and it's not good enough. And the politicians of all parties need to wake up, because schools should not be places where you promote political propaganda. And look, we've got 16-year-olds voting in elections shortly, so they're going to be brainwashed. My only hope, Peter, is that one thing I did learn after 35 years teaching is that 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds can be quite rebellious. They may well end up voting the opposite to what the school teachers are telling them to do.
Well,
Let's hope they do.
The irony is, of course, that Nigel Farage is, for example, is huge on TikTok. In fact, he has more TikTok followers than, I think I'm right in saying this, than Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey put together on TikTok, which is the medium that so many young people, including school-age children, are using. So actually, they will be getting their information from lots of different sources, including the ones they're told to avoid, like the Sun and the Daily Mail. God forbid that 2 of the biggest media brands in this country should be consulted. And also, I'm worried about the lack of critical thinking as well. I do a bit of teaching of journalism students, and I always say, if you want to know what is going on, you've got to read, yes, the Daily Telegraph, yes, the Sun, yes, the Daily Mail, and lots of other outlets. But you've also got to do, as I do every week, have a look at The Guardian, see what they're reporting, see what their perspective is, and actually come up with your own views. I listen to, consume all sorts of media that is actually antithetical, different to my views, and then come up with your own opinion, rather than simply saying the BBC and The Guardian are trusted, but in these people's views, The Sun, the Daily Mail, and other outlets, and as they put it, random YouTube channels, simply aren't.
Well, that's true. I mean, I've written for The Guardian. I've also written for the Daily Mail and the Telegraph. And I've also written for the Mirror, which is left-wing, I suppose. I hope, therefore, I'm fairly neutral. The danger of so-called critical thinking, Peter, is that it too will be captured by those teachers, the majority, who have particular ideologies and will use that idea of critical thinking. I'll give you an example. When this 9/11 took place, what was being taught in London schools, and the police saw this and cleared it, was that this is the view of President Bush, and this is the view of Osama bin Laden. They're different views, but they're equal views. That's what the teaching profession means by critical thinking. The views of the terrorist and the views of the victim are different but equal, and that's also a disaster. So this is a big issue. It needs to be solved, and we need to deal with it, but we'll get nowhere near that, because on the whole, politicians aren't interested in education. They're only interested in the short term. They're not interested in what's around the corner, and there's a lot of problems around the corner. We need to sort it.
Chris, thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to go to the House of Commons now. The Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is speaking.
There's a pattern common to all these scandals that time and again the British state struggle to recognise injustice because of who the victims are, because they're working class, because they're black, because they're women and girls. That is the injustice that this bill seeks to correct, and I hope it commands the support of the whole House. I will.
I'm most grateful. Would you agree there are a couple of things missing from this otherwise excellent bill? The first is an acknowledgement of the role that the media played in covering up many of the wrongs that happened. And the second is a national oversight mechanism, something that will ensure that when recommendations are made, that they are carried out.
I'm grateful for the intervention, and of course we must acknowledge the role of the media and others played in this. This was a cover-up at so many levels, and in relation to oversight mechanisms, I don't think this bill is the place for that, but I do agree with the proposition that where there are inquiries, there needs to be a better way of ensuring that there's follow-through on those inquiries. I will.
The Prime Minister is listed a litany.
The Prime Minister there in the House of Commons, will go back to that in a minute or two. Let me read out a few messages before we go to the break. Annie in Thatcham says, listening to the Home Secretary earlier, I was struck how she said she hoped the party opposite would not try to score cheap political points over this, and then in her reply to him literally did that herself. Simon in Nafferton says, I think the word diversity is misleading. Not my words, but diversity actually means conformity, that we are all the same regardless of background or ethnicity, which we clearly are not. Different cultures have different values. Lots more to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Chris says, Matthew Hulbert, could I answer your question? Typical Liberal, I say give him plank of the week. Well, listen, I'm very, very happy to have Matthew on my programme, and yeah, I disagreed with him, but that's okay. On my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable. Timothy Dolan from Barnsley in South Yorkshire says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Timothy. If we increase security on trains while stopping some knife crime wielding madman just targeting a bus travelling down the motorway, yes, it can stop on the hard shoulder, but a lot of carnage could still be inflicted. Well, listen, we can't all be entirely safe all the time, as very sadly those people found out on Saturday night. I want to talk now about something else that has happened in the House of Commons a little bit earlier on. The Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, asked what's called an urgent question. This is about Soldier F. Now, Soldier F, it was a soldier on Bloody Sunday 53 years ago in Londonderry in Northern Ireland, where 13 innocent civilians were shot dead. Soldier F was accused and tried on murder and attempted murder charges and completely exonerated on those very recently. Now, Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, will talk to me in a second, but let's just remind ourselves what happened in the House of Commons earlier.
General Lord Dannatt, the former Chief of the General Staff, said at the weekend, if potential recruits to the armed forces do not believe that their government will stand by them when performing their duties in a lawful manner, why risk joining at all? He was speaking regarding Labour's proposed Troubles Bill, which could see Northern Ireland veterans, without whom there would never have been any Good Friday Agreement in the first place, in the dock again by next year. So this minister called opponents of this naive. So what is her response to the former head of the British Army and the brave soldiers he led? Were they all naive too?
Seeing as the Honourable Member is attacking me for something that I didn't say, I can only assume that he cannot attack me. He is very welcome to check Hansard, where he will see that I was very specifically referring to people spreading misinformation. You can see it there in black and white in Hansard. It is in Hansard. It is in Hansard, absolutely, and I urge the Honourable Member to maybe reread it, and he will see the full quote.
Mark Francois there, who is the Shadow Defence Minister, and Louise Sander-Jones, the Defence Minister, replying to him. She's Labour, obviously, because they're the government. Let's speak to Mark now. Mark is the Shadow Defence Minister and Conservative for Raleigh and Wickford. Mark, did you get the answer you wanted?
No. And the problem is that Labour are ploughing on with this bill, even despite, as you said, the result of the Soldier F trial, which was sub judice for months, so we couldn't talk about it, but we can now. Crucially, Soldier F was acquitted, and the judge, Judge Lynch Casey, said that the standard of proof that was offered against him was, in the judge's words, well below the standard that will be required for a successful prosecution. He also said, in a 2-hour judgment, he was very thorough, I cannot interrogate a piece of A4 paper. In other words, it was based on 2 witness statements, which were 53 years old. One of those people has since died. So the point here is, how can Labour press on with a legacy bill which would expose Northern Ireland veterans, many in their 70s and 80s now, to this whole cycle of investigation and reinvestigation, when a learned judge has said it's practically impossible to achieve a successful prosecution after half a century, and yet still Labour power.
It's interesting as well, 6 former SAS soldiers criticising the bill, and they've written a letter to the Financial Times saying that the bill may marginally reduce the likelihood of fresh criminal prosecutions, but it does nothing to end the lawyers' conveyor belt of inquiries, inquests and civil actions. Call it what it is, lawfare by other means. Current proposals will go on feeding a system that grants disproportionate leverage to those most adept at weaponising the process, while the great majority of troubles, deaths caused by paramilitaries are airbrushed into the background. Again, back to the key point in all of this, which is that the army keep records, the terrorists do not.
Correct. And what is really going on here is this is lawfare, and this is an attempt by Sinn Féin to rewrite history, to make the British Army the aggressors and the IRA paramilitaries somehow into freedom fighters. That's what they are trying to achieve. And unfortunately, this Labour government has done a sordid backstairs deal with the Irish government in the Republic to facilitate this process. But look, importantly, you know, the SAS have come out against this. Many retired soldiers, from, you know, corporals to generals. I quoted Lord Dannatt, a highly respected former head of the British Army. So this goes right across the rank structure. But the Labour people are now coming out against it. So Lord West, a former security minister under Labour, said recently, we shouldn't be doing this. Lord Glusman, the founder of Blue Labour, said we must reverse it as soon as possible. Graham Stringer, very well respected senior backbencher on the Labour backbenches, said to continue this against one side makes no sense. Why does this matter so much? It's looking as if there could be a crunch vote on the second reading of the Labour Troubles Bill within a few weeks. So Labour MPs are going to have to decide where they stand. Do they stand with army veterans, without whom there never have been a Good Friday Agreement, or do they stand with Sinn Féin? That is going to be a choice for them. We stand with the army veterans.
I stand with the army veterans too, certainly, Mark, but what happens if there is evidence of criminality of either a terrorist or a veteran of the army? What happens if there's so many who, over 300,000 people who served in uniform during the Troubles, but what happens if there's someone, let's say there was evidence of someone in 1985 and evidence comes to light that they took part in criminal actions? Should they not be prosecuted?
Well, the Legacy Bill, so you've got our Legacy Act, which was the Conservative legislation, and you've got Labour's Troubles Bill to try and repeal it. So just to make a distinction.
Sure.
The Legacy Act offered conditional immunity, both to veterans and to alleged paramilitaries, unless there was compelling new evidence. In that scenario, a thing called the Legacy Commission could have conducted an investigation. If the soldier concerned or the paramilitary concerned, not that many paramilitaries were going to offer to come forward and give evidence, but if the commission deemed they had been truthful and cooperated, then they could be given immunity from prosecution. But if they were deemed to have lied or tried to hide something, they could still have been prosecuted if, crucially, there was compelling new evidence that hadn't been investigated many times before. That is the current legal position.
But you could, Mark, you could hypothetically have someone who murdered someone, who went outside the law, who murdered someone, who said, well, I'm cooperating, I'm doing exactly what I am told to do, I'm being open and honest and giving you all the information after this compelling new evidence comes to light, but nonetheless let down their unit, let down their fellow soldiers and went outside the law. And with what the Conservatives put, there was a level of immunity there. Surely those people should be prosecuted for breaking the law.
Well, this has always been two-tier justice, because none of those veterans who served in Northern Ireland were ever given letters of comfort by the Blair government.
But those were rescinded by Theresa Villiers when she was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Well, they may or may not have been, but the trial of John Downey, the alleged Hyde Park bomber, still famously collapsed when he referenced his letter of comfort. So some people argue they had no legal validity.
But just aside from that, Mark, but just aside from that point, that's a perfectly valid point.
Well, it's quite an important point.
Well, it's absolutely important, but the point is that if someone had murdered someone in my family 40 years ago, I'd still want them prosecuted.
Look, our Legacy Act still allowed for that, but there had to be compelling new evidence. And what Labour are doing is completely one-sided, because it will reopen this whole conveyor belt of inquests, Clono, Lockgall. These names might not mean a lot to some of your viewers on the mainland, but everyone in Northern Ireland will know what I'm talking about. And it's the whole one-sided nature of the process that we have so vehemently objected to.
Okay.
And we don't feel that Labour's Troubles Bill is in any way fair. And it's not just me that is saying that, it's ex-SAS people of the same.
Absolutely.
It's the former head of the British Army. It's even, if I may, the three senior Labour people that I read out as well.
You're absolutely right, Mark.
Senior Labour people saying, drop it.
Okay. Mark, thank you. That's Mark Francois there, who is the Shadow Defence Minister, also the Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. Just a reminder that from the 1st of December, so less than a month now, our talkTV app is going to be on the move. All of your favourite shows and podcasts are going to continue over on our new app. So if you're on the talkTV app, you need to get a new app, which is the Talk app. Yes, so if you're watching or listening on the talkTV app right now, great, fabulous, but you're going to need to delete that and download a new app from the App Store or Google Play. I did it. It took me a couple of minutes. I did it earlier in the programme. So delete the talkTV app, download the Talk app, and you'll be able to watch or listen. It's a much better app. We're asking you to change. Please do that by the 1st of December so we can continue to have the conversation and you can continue to have all full access to the home of common sense. Going to talk about the sport next. We'll take more of your calls as well. 0344 499 1000.
It's the first time I, can recollect this sort of incident on a train where you can't exactly get off. It's like an aeroplane in that regard, isn't it? You can't exactly get off. But what I would say is quite often when you go to train stations at night or in the evening like this was, you see the gates open.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mike Williams from Pusey in Wiltshire, who says, "Hi Peter, isn't it time for those left-wing extremists working on our education system to be named and shamed for polluting the minds of British kids?" This is a story that Reform UK are being compared to fascists by educators in the Orion group. They're apparently having an investigation into that. Steve in Swadlincote says, "Nobody in the UK should be allowed to wear face coverings unless for medical reasons." June in Worcester says, "I'm supposed to go to London this week and I don't go very often. I go about 4 times a year for a travel event and I'm just not going. I just don't feel safe. I was in Manchester recently. I don't feel safe on the trains." June, I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way. Certainly the trains are overall a very, very safe way to travel, and I hope you can come to London soon and enjoy that as well and not feel intimidated. We're going to talk now about the sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Dean Scoggins is the Deputy Head of Sport for The Sun. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good stuff. In football, attention turning to the midweek Champions League action. I know you're getting some of the press conference action as well. Liverpool have an interesting reunion with an old player coming back. Who is it? What reception is he going to get?
Trent Alexander-Arnold. Well, Arne Slot, the Liverpool boss, and Ryan Gravenberch, Liverpool midfielder, both say they'll be welcoming him back with a nice big hug to Anfield, which I'm sure they will before the fans are in the stadium. And but I think the Liverpool fans might have a slightly different opinion. I mean, they were the fans who booed him while he was still playing for them, not to forget, after he said he was going to go to Real Madrid. And Liverpool have not had a very good time of it the last few weeks. They did win on Saturday to end a 5-game losing run, but Real Madrid, 15-time European Cup winners, different proposition, and Jude Bellingham, of course, as well. So, yeah, Liverpool, really, really big night for them, and the fans it'll be hot at Anfield, I think it's fair to say.
Certainly. Spurs are also in action tomorrow night after Copenhagen, but can they put their home form right after another loss to Chelsea at the weekend?
Yeah, I as a Tottenham fan myself, Peter, wasn't a great day, I've got to say, against Chelsea. And then Mickey van der Ven and Jed Spence made it slightly worse by snubbing a sort of high five or handshake with their own manager at the end of the game, which is not a great look, is it? Not really. So, yeah, it was Thomas Blank instead of Thomas Frank in the paper over the weekend.
Very good.
But, yes, Frank has just spoken at his press conference ahead of, as you say, the Copenhagen game, and he said they both came, he doesn't say tail between legs, but I'm going to say tail between legs, into his office unprompted and said they wanted both to say very sorry. It wasn't to be disrespectful, they were just very upset at losing the game. I'm sure they were, very much so. So, yeah, Tottenham really, really need a home performance because they've been dismal at home so far this season.
The former England boss, Gareth Southgate, has been talking about unity in society. Tell us what he's been saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously loads of callers into your show, loads of guests as well, everyone talking about, you know, the difficulties that we're having, cultural, political, society.
Big survey out today about diversity. Is diversity our strength as well?
And but Southgate, obviously the former England manager, talking about how much the England football team has the power to unite everyone across the country. Thomas Tuchel now in charge. Obviously we've got a World Cup coming up in the USA, Mexico and Canada next year, so more pressure perhaps on the young role models to bring the country together, but perhaps, I don't know, maybe some of your callers might have a say on this, perhaps the only time the whole country really pulls together behind a team.
Do you know what, you know and I know I don't know very much about sport, and that's why we have experts like you coming into the studio, but that James Graham play, did you see it at the National Theatre? What was it called about the England team?
Yeah, England Expects, is it?
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, and it made me think about football in a way that I hadn't before, about uniting the nation, but the psychological aspects of it as well. There's a brilliant book, it was a not particularly brilliant film to be honest, called Playing the Enemy or Invictus, about the World Cup in South Africa in 1995, obviously just after the end of apartheid, and how it brought people together, how incredibly important it was for Nelson Mandela to go out wearing a Springboks shirt to a predominantly historically white sport as well. So sport has an amazing ability to bring people together, and it's very interesting what Gareth Southgate is saying.
What's interesting is I think there's a real misnomer in this country that people think people in the media don't want the England football team to do very well. And it could not be further from the truth, I tell you. When we're downstairs on that Sun floor, England score a goal, we are up with everybody else, and I can promise you I want to write that headline when they win the World Cup.
Of course, Dean, thank you as always. Dean Scoggins there, Deputy Head of Sport for The Sun. We'll talk more about unity, diversity, whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000. And thank you to the very cheeky message from Debbie, who has asked me if Tech Up Dave helped me reinstall the app on my phone. No, I did it all by myself. That's just to remind you that the talkTV app is being discontinued on the 1st of December. So you've got to get a new app. It's cunningly called the Talk app, and that is something that you need to put on your phone. I did it. It took me 2 minutes. Did it in a break earlier today. And believe me, if I can do it, anyone can. Let's remind ourselves just of our top story, what the Home Secretary said in the House of Commons just a short while ago in regard to what happened over the weekend, that horrendous attack, and a man has now been charged in regard to what had happened at Huntingdon.
I would also like to pay tribute to the breathtaking bravery of those on the train itself, including the heroic acts of the passengers and train crew who intercepted the attacker. I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be.
That's the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, speaking in the House of Commons a little bit earlier on. Tim has been in touch from Suffolk and says, in regard to security, I agree with you that airport-style security would simply not work in regard to railway stations. However, a full-height gate similar to a turnstile operated by a ticket or card, facial recognition watching the gate, just like we have in construction sites now, would be quite cheap as well. Leslie says, hi Peter, how are we supposed to feel safe when we see Starmer allowing into the UK students and their families from Gaza? Even Egypt won't accept them due to the risk. Sean in Gloucester says, no sane-minded person would want us to start becoming a vigilante state, but if authorities can't protect the people of this country, what are we supposed to do? Allow ourselves to get stabbed? Are women and children raped and abused? They need to sort this out rapidly, or people will start down this road, I am sure. How many youngsters and adults actually know about the Falklands War 43 years ago, says Dave in Dorset, talking about what our children are taught in our schools. Yeah, it was actually, it was before I was born, of course, but I love history and I love reading about history, and I know a reasonable amount about the Falklands War. I certainly know the bravery that was shown by so many people. You hear from really brave people like Simon Weston as well on other occasions as well about what actually happened there. Nick in Winchester says, as a follow-up, how dare she at a time like this just play politics with the question of stop and search, blaming the Tories? She should be announcing that stop and search will be introduced immediately at every mainline station. Police need to be visible. Yes, it only took 8 minutes to get there, which means they must have had their feet up watching the football results. Please stop procrastinating. Do something, Nick. Now come on. They will have leapt into action, and within a couple of minutes will have got to there, and I think we can very sincerely and straightforwardly say well done to the emergency services. I know they were quite close to Huntingdon Station, but that was the point. The point was that they were nearby and on hand and could actually get to that train very, very quickly. Another thought here from another correspondent who says junior doctors going on strike because they feel aggrieved about wages is disgusting. I'd rather see that money go to fund the police force to keep us safe. Parliament needs to act and stop NHS staff from striking. Well, lots to discuss on all of that. We're going to talk more about what the Home Secretary is saying, the Shadow Home Secretary as well. Colonel James Sunderland joins us in a minute. We'll also be talking about asylum levels and what is in the Sun tomorrow. We'll be taking all your calls as well. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company this Monday evening. There's an awful lot to talk about, including safety on public transport. That's what the Home Secretary's been talking about after that horrific attack at the weekend. We will talk about that. We'll talk about the BBC as well. There is a new report out, a whistleblower, because they apparently doctored a Trump speech. This is an internal report that has just been revealed. A panorama programme broadcast a week before the US election completely misled viewers. That's the allegation, by showing the president telling supporters he was going to walk to the Capitol with them to fight like hell, when in fact he said he would walk with them to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. We'll talk about that with Mark Littlewood a little bit later on. We'll also find out what's in the sun and take all your calls. We're going to talk to Stephen in Cambridgeshire in just a second. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Kevin O'Sullivan will be here between 7 and 10, of course. You can get your call in. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us. Well, Shabana Mahmood is the Home Secretary. She's actually been talking for quite a while in the House of Commons. Let's just bring you a little bit of what she said earlier on this afternoon. This was a statement that she made after the attack at the weekend.
I'd also like to pay tribute to the breathtaking bravery of those on the train itself, including the heroic acts of the passengers and train crew who intercepted the attacker. I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be.
Well, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, said there are many questions still to answer. Who knew what when? What did the authorities know? Could this have been prevented? This is what the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, asked of the Home Secretary.
Our thoughts are with the victims of this appalling attack and their families, as the Home Secretary quite rightly said. I join her in paying tribute to the emergency services who responded so fast, and to the brave interventions by members of the public and the train staff that prevented an even worse tragedy from occurring. They are truly heroes. This attack has horrified and shocked the whole nation. People simply travelling by train were indiscriminately attacked. The horror the passengers experienced will likely stay with them forever. Anthony Williams has now been charged. As the Home Secretary said, he had been involved in previous incidents in Peterborough, and in the early hours of Saturday morning was also allegedly involved in an attack on the Docklands Right Railway in London. Will she confirm, as I've been told, that police in London knew Williams' identity following that? And if so, were Cambridgeshire police informed so they could track him down? In essence, I'm asking, were there any opportunities to have prevented this from occurring?
Well, Chris Philp there, the Shadow Home Secretary, referencing Anthony Williams, the 32-year-old from Peterborough, who has been charged with 11 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of actual bodily harm and 1 count of possession of a bladed article. British Transport Police have made that clear today. Lots more to discuss on this. Colonel James Sunderland joins me now. He's a military expert, former MP as well, worked with the Home Secretary, former Home Secretary James Cleverly when he was an MP. James, thank you for joining me on the programme today. What questions, from what you're hearing about Chris Philp, there are clearly a lot of questions still to be answered here. In a more general sense, what do you think Parliament's role should be in regard to getting to the bottom of this, especially in supporting the police now they have charged a suspect?
I think that what I saw on TV this afternoon, I think was covered very well. I think that questions have to be asked. It's the role of opposition to ask the government those questions, but it's also the role of government to articulate what happened and to give a very full and frank statement to the House. It's difficult at this point in time to understand motive, and I think that that's probably where we need to go right now.
Transport can be quite vulnerable. We know, of course, there are many security aspects to taking a flight. What should happen when people take trains, do you think, James?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think ultimately when you get on an aircraft, you pass through a metal detector, you have your bags checked. It's very difficult to get things that are dangerous onto aircraft. How do you do that for trains? I mean, are we honestly suggesting that we're going to be passing through a metal detector or having baggage checked? It's very difficult. And I think that what sets train travel apart from air travel, of course, is the inclusivity. It's access. It's very easy to get on a train. It's very easy for people of all ages to get on a train and go and see loved ones or go to work. I have to say, it is very difficult for anybody to either anticipate or to deal with the lone wolf attack, and that's been the real threat until recently. It's the thing that police are most concerned about. It's the lone wolf in a van. It's the lone wolf with a knife. Very difficult to legislate against. Very difficult to stop.
And you can't keep everyone safe all the time, as we know. And are you then going to say every bus stop has to have an arch because people carry knives in buses? And that has certainly happened on various occasions. James, I just wonder. I mean, we've a lot of our viewers and listeners who've been in touch. Quite a substantial number. I've been broadcasting over the last few days since this attack. They're really not feeling safe at the moment. I don't want to be alarmist. I don't want to say to anybody that they should feel less safe than they should. But I mean, there are people saying they're not going to come into London, for example. There are people saying they're thinking twice about taking train journeys and so on. What would you say to them, James? Because in your view, as someone with a military background who's been an MP, how safe are we actually?
Peter, life has to go on. As scary as this is, as awful as this is, my heart goes out to the victims. There are good people all over the world working hard at trying to prevent this kind of thing. There are good people reacting. I mean, look at the actions of the staff. I mean, quite extraordinary. I mean, marching towards the guns, marching towards the knife. I mean, it's a very rare gift that people have to do that. But my overriding message as a former MP and somebody who has studied this very environment for a long time is that life goes on. Transport is safe. People are generally safe. The chances of these things happening are very, very slim. And we must continue to go about our daily lives.
So you would support, even within that, the review of security that the rail unions are calling for? What would you say to their calls in that regard?
I think it's always wise to review security. I mean, why not? There's no reason why we can't do that. But I think we have to be realistic in the sense that, what's that review going to do? If that review is going to suggest that we have a guard on every train, I can live with that. If it suggests that we need to have metal detectors, some way of making travel more difficult, then I probably wouldn't accept that. It is very difficult. I mean, people are talking in the news today about biometrics, about optics, about making it easier perhaps for cameras to be installed, for cameras to spot individuals that might be known to the police. I mean, it's a very difficult, complex, expensive process to do that. I just think that we need to be vigilant. The Mark I eyeball always served me well on military operations. I think the Mark I eyeball needs to continue to serve people well across the UK. We need to be vigilant. We need to watch these things. We need to be careful of people that are acting suspiciously. If in doubt, call the police. It's about being vigilant, and it's just about being safe. But it's simply about spotting things before they go wrong. And if sadly things do go wrong, it's about reacting as best we can.
James Sunderland, in many senses, you've always been a man of great vision. Military expert, former MP, thank you for joining me on the programme today. Lots of people getting in touch about the Mayor of London as well. Jane says, please can we find out how much all these trips to Brazil are costing? Sadiq Khan and others at the moment, and the Prime Minister and officials and hangers-on later in the week. There are, of course, many international conferences and reasons they're out of the country. It's rare for Keir Starmer to be here for 7 days in a row, it would appear. Mark in Dorset says, has Tim Davie resigned yet? The BBC disgusts me. I want the corporation closed down. Why on earth are we forced to fund it? Well, we're going to be talking, Mark, about a story that has just emerged actually this afternoon in regard to the BBC, in regard to the Panorama programme and what is happening with that, and the fact that there are allegations certainly that they have doctored footage. There's a 19-page internal report that is going to drip out over the next few days. I imagine we'll talk about that more over the next few days, but we are going to talk about it in a few minutes too. In the meantime, I want to go to Stephen in Cambridgeshire, who's been waiting very patiently to come on the air about Shabana Mahmood. Stephen's given us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Yeah, if Shabana Mahmood and Keir Starmer are so, adamant about solving knife crime, why don't they get on Sadiq Khan's case and tell him to get a grip of what's happening in London?
It's a very, very fair point, and certainly he is not just the Mayor of London, he's also the Police and Crime Commissioner.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
He's in charge of the whole thing, so, basically he's taking money under false pretences.
Well, I don't think he's taking money under false pretences, but there's certainly a lot more that he could do, Stephen, certainly. I mean, they do ask him these questions at Mayor's Question Time and so on, but as far as he's concerned, everything's hunky-dory.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've watched them. The way he talks to Susan Hall and some other members of the Parliament, the Assembly, it's disgusting. I also should point out that I live in Huntingdon.
Okay.
And all the Labour and the Conservatives coming on going, oh, wasn't the police response fantastic? Yeah, it was fantastic. But what you've got to appreciate is Huntingdon Police Station is probably a 2.5, 3-minute blue light ride round the Ring Road.
Yeah.
Cambridgeshire Constabulary main headquarters is just over the road from the railway station, and Inchbrook Hospital is less than, 3/4 of a mile up the road. It was fantastic, but they're using it as a smokescreen to cover up for their failures.
What has life been like in Huntingdon the last few days? Clearly, people must be very concerned.
Well, yeah, they are, but it's nothing new. I mean, we had a young lad stabbed and killed in the country park 1 or 2 years ago, I think it was. So, I mean, knife crime, it's just endemic now.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate your thoughts today, and all the best to you and everybody in Huntingdon who's dealing with all of this. Another person's been in touch to say all police should be armed with guns and pepper spray. We need to get tough on crime. Let me just have a quick look at a couple of tweets that have come in as well. Lady Anne says, of course £9 billion won't cover what Reform UK wants to do. There's billions of savings to be made all over. You need to ask Zia Youssef and Richard Tice where all the savings are coming from. Angela says, I think the police should carry guns. Police all over the world, even at the seafront in Cyprus, at Paphos, all over Australia do. I felt much safer when I was there. And on the app as well, after the very, very cheeky suggestion that Tech Up Dave helped me reinstall the app. I did it all myself. You know that from Monday the 1st of December, our talkTV app is on the move. All of your favourite shows and podcasts are going to continue over on the Talk app. So if you're watching or listening on the talkTV app right now, you'll need to download the Talk app. So if you're on the talkTV app, you need to get a new app. It's the Talk app from the App Store or Google Play. You can do it now, get out of the way, get it sorted. I did it in a break. I did it in 2 minutes earlier on today. And Nat says, I had talkTV, Talk and Times Radio on my phone. Thank heavens, I'll now only need one app. They're all on the same app. Amy says, not about Reform's economic plans, but I watched Farage's speech, and he said he is thinking about having experts in certain fields in government and maybe make them ministers. If they are not elected, would they have to be made peers in order to be accountable to Parliament? Another person says, I'm very concerned about this company calling Reform UK fascist in schools. I thought teachers were supposed to be unbiased. The Education Secretary must act now. David says your recent Reform guest shows why they will not form the next government. He seemed clueless about how Reform will fund the spending plans they are putting forward. I like the general thrust of Reform UK's programme, but the devil is in the detail, which is sadly lacking. Jules said the Home Secretary is an utter disgrace. Rather than pathetically pointing fingers, she'd do better to make the police enforce stop and search, regardless of proportionality, political correctness or any other lefty liberal policies. Just get it done. Another person says criminals more than often cover their faces, so facial recognition would not actually catch anyone. And Maddie says, so more surveillance cameras at stations, yet we're already the most surveilled society in the world, and it hasn't stopped terrorists, knife crime, rapes, etc. They only work after the event. Again, nothing's going to be done to prevent these crimes. We'll keep your comments coming up no matter how you get in touch. You can give me a ring, of course, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about the BBC in a second, a scandal perhaps brewing in regard to their flagship Panorama programme and a documentary about Donald Trump. They've had all sorts of problems, not least with the Gaza documentary. Remember that one that was narrated by the son of a Hamas terrorist? Lots to discuss here on Talk in just a second.
We have got forensics still conducting their supporting the investigation by examining the train. The train station itself is still shut. There are trains passing through, but they aren't stopping at the station itself. But I actually got here last night around just after 9 o'clock, which the incident had been dealt with at that point in time. There was a phenomenal police presence here. There must have been 20 to 30 police cars, around 10 ambulances still at that point dealing with casualties, and also four fire engines. But there was a very, very robust police response.
It's the first time I've, can recollect this sort of incident on a train where you can't exactly get off. It's like an aeroplane in that regard, isn't it? You can't exactly get off. But what I would say is quite often when you go to train stations at night or in the evening like this was, you see the gates open, don't you, all the time. And I doubt this individual actually bought a ticket, right? I mean, I'm speculating. But maybe if we had better security at train stations where gates were consistently closed, where there are access gates,
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
So this is an interesting story that is coming out of the Telegraph. The BBC, the paper alleges, doctored a Donald Trump speech by making him appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riot. We remember the Capitol Hill riot on the 6th of January. That is 2021, of course, a number of years ago now. This is an internal whistleblowing memo in the BBC that the Telegraph has seen. A panorama programme broadcast a week before the US election apparently completely misled viewers by showing the president telling supporters he was going to walk to the Capitol with them to fight like hell, when in fact he said he would walk with them to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. The allegedly mangled footage was highlighted in a 19-page dossier on BBC bias, which was compiled by a recent member of the Corporation Standards Committee. It's now circulating in government departments. It's been leaked, and the Telegraph has it. The dossier said the programme made the US president say, in inverted commas, things he never actually said, by splicing together footage from the start of the speech with something he said nearly an hour later. It's claiming as well that senior executives and the BBC's chairman had ignored and dismissed a string of serious complaints raised by the corporation's own standards watchdog. This is in regard to Panorama, and we're going to get other excerpts of the memo which are going to accuse the BBC's Arabic service of bias over its coverage in the war in Gaza and accuse the corporation of effective censorship of its coverage of the transgender debate. Well, the BBC itself has said we don't comment on leaked documents. When the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. It also talks about the author of this, Michael Prescott. He's a former advisor to a board committee where differing views and opinions of our coverage are routinely discussed and debated. Well, let's see the clip the Telegraph posted on their story earlier today.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to see that, and I know that there are many people who are really, really worried about fake news. They're really worried about things that have been doctored. And of course, you know, the only difference between me sitting here talking to you from a studio with a large media company behind me and me sitting in, you know, a cupboard in my kitchen is trust, is resources, yes, but also trust. And the BBC has to be an organisation we trust. We also pay for it as well. All of us, almost all of us, have to pay for it through our licence fee. So this scandal is yet another one off the back of the Bob Villan scandal. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Also off the back of the Gaza documentary about life in Gaza, which was narrated by the son of a Hamas terrorist. I want to speak now to Mark Littlewood, the Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, the problem here is trust, isn't it? And if you can't trust Panorama on the BBC, many people will say, well, how can you trust really anything the BBC says? This is a flagship brand, a current affairs documentary that has broken countless stories over many years. It is, you know, it's been in controversy previously over the Diana interview, and trust will be eroded yet further through this document.
Peter, you're exactly right, but I think I'd go a bit further than that. You mentioned earlier the BBC say they won't comment on leaked documents, but they will comment on feedback. So let me give them some feedback that they might want to consider. This is by far the most cut and dried and the worst example of BBC bias compared to all of the other fairly bad examples you've mentioned. Why? Because in some of the other examples, you can just about believe there's human error. Oh, sorry, somebody didn't cut Bob Villan off early enough, for example. Perhaps we should have been a bit quicker. Perhaps we should have checked out a bit more the ideology or the intentions of people we were working with on a documentary about Gaza. But here, as you rightly say, Peter, on their flagship programme, right, this isn't just somebody speaking loosely as a presenter on a live show. On their flagship programme, they have spliced together footage of President Trump in order to make it look like he said something or is encouraging something that he plainly wasn't. Any reputable documentary would have had it time-stamped that, you know, Trump said this at about noon and he said this at about 1. They deliberately spliced this together to give the impression that Donald Trump had said something that he had not. And worse still, this dossier is an internal memo within the BBC alerting them to this this outrage, really. And they appear to have done absolutely nothing about it. So on the face of it, I think this is the worst case of BBC bias, combined with a complete inability to correct that bias that I've seen in my lifetime.
Wow, I mean, those are strong words. It's really interesting that Michael Prescott is involved with this as well. He spent 3 years as an independent external advisor to the broadcaster's editorial guidelines and standards committee. He left the role in June. This is now going around various government departments. He wrote in his letter, "I departed from the advisory role with profound and unresolved concerns about the BBC. My view is that the executive repeatedly failed to implement measures to resolve highlighted problems and in many cases simply refused to acknowledge there was an issue at all."
Well, I mean, there it is in black and white. I mean, okay. I mean, my judgment is, others may disagree, but my judgment is, as a broadcaster, the BBC is a left-wing, anti-Trump, pro-Palestinian broadcaster. That is essentially, either consciously or subconsciously, their editorial direction. Now, I wouldn't want to ban that. That's absolutely fine. Different platforms and different channels can take a different line or a different approach or have a different philosophy about how they see the world, Peter. And the BBC can take that one. But in that case, it has to be treated like, for example, the Guardian newspaper. It can't be the national broadcaster that we are obliged to pay for any more than we should be obliged to buy the Guardian every morning. If it is going to pursue this sort of approach, and it has continually, and without correction, it's now making virtually no reasonable objective effort to be a straightforward, unbiased broadcaster, fine, but it needs to be a private channel competing with the likes of you and talkTV, and it needs to raise money from its advertisers, its viewers, or its subscribers on the same basis. Anyone who now thinks we can justify the compulsory licence fee, I mean, it's beyond me that we should do that. The BBC, I think, is always slightly tilted left, but in the last 5 or 10 years, objectivity has gone out of the window. And again, worth underscoring, this wasn't a slip of the pen. This wasn't somebody just saying something about Trump that they regretted later. This is their flagship current affairs programme. This is supposed to tell the unalloyed truth, and what they actually did was to effectively splice footage in order to tell a story that was not so. Absolutely outrageous and appalling that the BBC top brass apparently have failed to act on it. Yet more grist to the mill for those of us who think that the BBC should be treated like a TV station like any other and have no special privileges of the licence fee and compulsory funding from anyone who owns a TV set.
Michael Prescott also said in his report it was completely misleading to edit the clip in the way Panorama aired it. The fact that Mr. Trump did not explicitly exhort supporters to go down and fight at Capitol Hill was one of the reasons there were no federal charges for incitement to riot. Mark, thank you. That is Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Just to give them their due, I will read out what the BBC said again. BBC spokesman: "While we don't comment on leaked documents when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Michael Prescott is a former advisor to a board committee where differing views and opinions of our coverage are routinely discussed and debated." I mean, that's fine, but it's not views or opinions. We're dealing with facts here. We're dealing with, was this spliced? Was this a bit of this and a bit of that put together to change the meaning on Panorama? Let's see again this little video from the Telegraph. Gordon Rayner, their associate editor, talking about this story. Another scandal for the BBC about how it edited and then broadcast footage of Donald Trump.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Well, that is what the Telegraph have put out there. And there's actually a former BBC employee who's been watching this coverage, who's got in touch with me. There's a former BBC employee who says, when I worked at the BBC, there was a strict rule about clips of MPs speaking in Parliament and elected representatives in devolved parliaments in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. You were not allowed to edit a clip to splice two parts together so that politicians could not be misrepresented by the media. I think this is a parliamentary rule imposed on broadcasters. I remember as well when I was a student in America, I was learning journalism at Columbia School of Journalism in New York, and they told us you cannot in any way change what politicians are saying, particularly the president. You've got to play it exactly as it is. If they say ums, ers and all the rest of it, you can't take out a little bit of that. There is a real worry about this. I worry about the BBC and bias in regard to Bob Villan as well. You know, I've been banging on about this for a while. I'm going to continue banging on about it. It's now 128 days since that incident. That was at Glastonbury. The coverage of Glastonbury, and the BBC let him go on for another 40 minutes. And the singer, Pascal Robinson Foster, also says that when he came off the stage, he was congratulated by BBC employees. Now, we've no way of knowing whether that's true or not, but what we do know is that even in Somerset Police, who have a standing bid to talk to their Chief Constable Sarah Crew, she's welcome on my programmes anytime. I'm here all week. She is very welcome on Drive anytime between now and Friday, or indeed on the weekend programmes. Chief Constable Sarah Crew will not come on, has so far declined to come on to my programmes to explain why, after 128 days, Pascal Robinson Foster, who shouted death, death to the IDF, has not been arrested for incitement. He should be interviewed, he should be cautioned, he should be charged, I believe, and justice should be done, because I think he is guilty of incitement. This former BBC employee has sent me another message as well, who says, although it does not cover speeches outside parliamentary chambers, the spirit of the rule that this person was talking about earlier, about not splicing things together, not taking a bit of this and a bit of that and making a different rule, a different meaning. Although it does not cover speeches outside parliamentary chambers, the spirit of the rule should guide producers, particularly with highly controversial politicians or topics. The BBC asked us to trust us. The BBC asked us to trust Panorama. There have been scandals in the past, and this is just a new one. What do you think about it? Well, Jane says, I've watched debates in Parliament live, watched the news items, nothing like what I watched, always gotcha for the Tories. Nicola in Norfolk, the BBC Panorama story makes a mockery of the BBC's current advert. They're fighting the world of misinformation and fake news. They cannot be allowed to get away with this. Well, I wonder if BBC Verify, which is a huge bank of employees, would verify BBC Panorama. Dawn in Chelmsford says, hi Peter, I think a lot of folks have had enough of the BBC. Is there no end to their misleading reporting? It is an insult that we have to pay for this stuff. And Jane says the BBC haven't been trusted for years. Many never watched it. Why should they pay for it? Lots more to come in this. We're also going to look at what is inside the Sun. We're going to talk to their night news editor, John Lucas, in just a second. Lots to discuss here on Talk. Well, before 7 o'clock, of course, we'll get your views on the air. You want to give me a ring about the BBC? You want to give me a ring about train travel and public safety? Whatever you want to talk about, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, Peter, surely as licensed payers we have a legal right to refuse to pay for the BBC if they're clearly committing deception. After all, they've tried to deceive us over and over again. It's just so wrong. I'm sick of them. This is a big story. I think it's going to be a big story tomorrow as well. And there are lots of big stories around today. Of course, we've been talking about them. You want to talk about it. You want to talk about the train story. Obviously, we'll be careful because there are charges in that case now. Whether you want to talk about this absolutely disgraceful story of Reform UK being taught in schools as if they're fascists. Whatever you want to talk about between now and 7 o'clock, you give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Kevin's coming up between 7 and 10. I'm sure he will continue the conversation. He's got a big exclusive coming. He'll tell us a bit about that in a few minutes' time as well. But for the meantime, I want to talk about further big stories with John Lucas, the night news editor at The Sun. John, great to see you in the studio. How are you doing?
Evening, very well.
The train attack, there's just so much detail coming out of this now. Tell us how The Sun is covering this.
Yeah, absolutely horrific story that broke overnight, Saturday night. Today we're piecing together this 24-hour period where the suspect, the individual who's been arrested over this, allegedly has carried out further offences beyond this attack on the train. So what we've found today is that this period seems to have started on Friday night about 7 o'clock. A 14-year-old boy was stabbed in Peterborough, taken to hospital, fortunately not life-threatening injury. We then have another stabbing on Saturday in the early hours of the morning, where it appears this chap has travelled down to London and stabbed another teenager at a DLR station. Then back in Peterborough again, we've got these two other incidents where this chap seems to have appeared at a barber's shop. There's video that I'm sure lots of people have seen circulating online of him brandishing this rather large knife. Amid all of this, obviously there's going to be big questions about what the police were doing to track this guy down. We know Cambridgeshire Police have referred themselves to the IOPC, so to bring in the outside.
The Independent Office of Police Conduct as well, but they've rejected that that referral apparently.
Right. Yeah. But I mean,
they say it doesn't quite reach the threshold.
Yeah, because all of this is going to all come out in the wash.
Yeah.
When it gets to court, and beyond that, we're obviously hearing some stories of heroism. We've found out one of the victims today is actually a footballer for Scunthorpe United. He was slashed across the arm. Again, fortunately, it's not a life-threatening injury. Another chap, Stephen Crean, he is a Forest fan, Nottingham Forest fan. He was on his way home from the football, and he was actually one of the few people who, decided to try and take a stand against this guy. Obviously, in a train carriage, very, very hard to, even a fist fight would be very, very difficult to do. Yeah. Someone armed with a knife, it's very hard.
It's moving, it's crowded, there are lots of scared people around.
Exactly.
It's a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, this guy, he did get up, he tried to do what he could. He ended up, he got stabbed in the hand, he got stabbed 2 or 3 times in the head, in the back, across his lower body as well. And he said that because he was wearing a baseball cap, he said the doctors told him he's very lucky if he'd not been wearing that cap, he could well have been killed. But for all we know, that saved lives because he's delayed him in the attack. We know the train driver as well acted very quickly to not stop the train out there in the middle of the countryside. He's brought it into the station. Other people have intervened, and it's an extraordinary story, and it obviously can't say too much about it, but we do see incidents like this from time to time. Remember, a couple of years ago we had Valdo Cadocane, which sort of it does have some similarities, that case. So and we'll keep on looking at
lots of reporting, of course, in the Sun tomorrow. Let's talk about David Lammy and this bizarre and very long taxi journey. This was a story a few months ago, but now there is more detail coming out. A French court being told about the cabbie. He was cleared of a theft charge, but some of the detail is incredible.
Yeah, this is Taxigate. If you remember back in April, Lammy, obviously in a different job then at the time, his foreign sec, but now he'd been over in Italy and he needed to get to France. Why not just get a taxi, as we all would? 700 quid.
Yeah,
it's
I get
fine.
£700 taxis all the time.
Yeah, but incredibly, it descended into this farcical row he had with the taxi driver. Who really knows what happened? None of us were there, apart from David Lammy, the taxi driver, Lammy's wife, Nicola Green, and it all revolves around the taxi driver at some point had asked for more money. Lammy didn't think that was a very good idea. They had a row in the taxi. When they got to the destination, this argument continued. The taxi driver drove off with all of Lammy's luggage and personal items in the boot. Now, very embarrassing for Lammy at the time. The taxi driver's been up in court today on a charge of theft, which he was actually cleared of. But some of the stuff he's come out with, he turned up on... He's a character himself. It's one of those... There's two people you probably wouldn't want to be stuck in a taxi with.
Yep.
One's David Lammy.
Yes.
And one is probably this particular...
The taxi driver. Right. Overall, not a great combo.
Because he'd said something about, oh, I saw Lammy had a gun. Which is mad, of course.
No, he didn't have a gun.
And his argument was, well, like the lawyer said, well, why didn't you say anything to him at the time? He said, well, you know, he's a foreign minister. I thought he was going to behave as one. And he said of Lammy's wife, she had a crazy meltdown. It was mental. She'd tried to open the door on the motorway because she wanted to sit in the front. She was screaming at me. Obviously, in a court of law, you know, you're entitled to say
what you like.
Say, and it can be reported. You know, I'm sure Lammy and his wife
I'm sure David Lammy and Nicola Green would dispute all of that.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting point as well about PTSD. Tell us about that.
Yes, because the taxi driver, so this is Nassim Mimoun, and he said at one point during this row, he claims that David Lammy slapped the back of the headrest, back of the chair, and said, "Effing French," and this swearing apparently has left this poor guy with PTSD, and he says, yeah, he was blacked out. He said he claims he's got epilepsy, which he hadn't had an epileptic instance since 1989, but he says now that this has happened,
right,
that's all come back.
This is a truly bizarre
He was on
story.
crutches in court. We were the only national newspaper to get over there for this, actually. Just blow around
I'm
trumpet.
sort of fascinated by this. Well done to the Sun. I mean, I'm sort of fascinated by this story. I mean, you've got so many weird and wonderful elements. I just don't think that David Lammy will be using that taxi service again.
No. I mean, we did speak to the taxi driver afterwards. We did a little courtroom step interview, but quite frankly, you couldn't publish very much of what he said.
Right. So
it's a bit of a character. Two sort of big personalities meeting each other, didn't get on at all.
Well, good for you for being in court. We can certainly hail your efforts on that one. Let's speak about Gen Z and LOL.
Yeah, so apparently...
Gen Z. I always say Gen Z, and people always message and say, Gen Z, we're in the UK, which is true.
Yeah, well, Gen Z have got all these, you know, rules and regulations now for what's cool and what's not cool in text messages, which I think is very unfair. So apparently, writing LOL, laugh out loud,
LOL,
too often gives them the ick.
Right.
So it's a bad thing to do, so don't type LOL. Overuse of emojis as well. So some of the worst ones are the thumbs up emoji, which I think is quite useful.
It's very dad emoji, isn't it?
I feel kind
Dads generally
I feel a bit
send the
targeted.
Thumb up one, yeah. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the hit list of all my texting styles. The poo emoji is the most cringe if you use that.
Tell us about voice notes as well. This is 2,000 smartphone users. Found 26% of young people think playing voice notes in public is uncool. Well, I agree with that. I mean, unless you have
100%.
the headphones. But some people hate voice notes. Where do you stand on voice notes?
It really, really annoys me, actually, and especially if reporters send me a voice note instead of just sending a text message.
Right.
I just put that on the record. It'd be better just to text.
You should reply and say, "Don't you know who I am?"
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
I'm big and important.
Yeah, well, if only. But yeah, and there's lots of things that we mustn't do, which I think, you know, it's very unfair because Gen Z haven't been around. We grew up with, we invented this stuff.
Still there,
and
still
now
there.
It's not cool.
It's interesting as well about question marks. I occasionally have been guilty of sending, what was really annoying is you send someone, you know, can we meet in 20 minutes at the restaurant? And the person reads the message but doesn't reply.
Yes.
And then 10 minutes later, you're thinking, are we meeting in 10 minutes? Are we not? Put a question mark on it. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. Some people don't, and 21% said after 2 minutes it's a major red flag. Someone I won't be asking to a restaurant anywhere near me anytime soon are seagulls. So let's tell us about the evolution of seagulls.
Yeah, seagulls. So you're on the Brighton seafront or wherever, and you're trying to eat your chips. The seagull swoops down, nicks them, and flies off, and you're left very angry. You should be pleased because you've witnessed, you know, this final stage on the evolutionary journey of this magnificent creature. They have evolved to become elite food snatchers. So it's all because scientists say this, because the way their eyes are placed far back in the back of their head, the shape of their wings allows them to have a slow, controlled flight in, but also to lift away, flap away quickly once they've got hold of the food. And they also communicate with each other, so the squawking isn't just making a racket.
Noise for the sake of it,
When they spot a food source, they tell their other seagull mates. And this is all about evolution, and you know, who knows where
this will lead.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots to chew over in the Sun tomorrow, not just the food that the seagulls have nicked. John Lucas, night news editor at the Sun, thank you very much indeed. I love voice notes, by the way. I love sending them, I love receiving them here at this station. 03444 499 1000 is the number to send them in on. Dawn in Chelmsford says, I love the David Lammy taxi story. Mastermind Lammy and his bizarre occurrences seem to fit together, says Dawn. Yeah, I mean, he's referencing Celebrity Mastermind there. If you haven't watched it, it's a treat. It's a treat. I actually introduced someone very senior at the Ministry of Justice to that who hadn't seen it previously when David Lammy took over as Justice Secretary, and I just think it was a gift to the nation, quite frankly. Stay with us here on Talk.
That would reassure people.
I was back in the UK for only 5 days last week, and during that time there were 3 absolute horrors. There was the unbelievable bloody stabbing of an innocent dog walker. There was a court case about another horrific crime that all came to a conclusion that involved an asylum seeking related incident, and now we have this, which happened as I was flying out of the country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Plenty of people reacting to the story about the BBC. I expect we'll do more on this tomorrow. This is the Panorama broadcast that apparently, according to a leaked report, spliced together 2 bits of a speech by Donald Trump to be misleading. Now, the BBC say they won't discuss a leaked document. It'll be very interesting to see where this story goes tomorrow. I expect we'll be discussing it on Talk Drive tomorrow, maybe through the day as well. We'll see. Lee says the BBC shouldn't be our national broadcaster anymore. They're not fit for purpose. Gary says if this story about the BBC doctoring speeches by Trump turns out to be true, then you can stick a fork in them. They are done because they've just given away every licence fee payer the excuse they need to stop paying that licence because they can't be trusted with the truth. Well, Gary, there are many occasions when the BBC has not told the truth. Trust is so incredibly important, especially when you're paying a licence fee. Mark in Selby says, sadly, I watch the BBC News mainly to see what news to not report on and what they fill the space with. Tonight, nothing on Reevesgate, space filled with an escaped flamingo. Good Lord, says Mark. Well, I certainly watch the BBC. I pay my licence fee and I watch all sorts of BBC programmes because I think it's good to have a diversity of lots of different things that you talk about and can see what other people are reporting. But I always do it with a sceptical eye. I always keep my critical thinking faculties on alert. Paul's in Birmingham and has some thoughts about the TV licence. Paul, I gather you cancelled yours, is that correct?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Hello, mate. Yeah, I cancelled my TV licence probably about 5 years ago because I won't support their left-wing bias. And the one thing that really infuriated me, Peter, was if you cast your mind back to Donald Trump's first state visit on the flagship BBC morning show hosted by Victoria Derbyshire, they had the audacity, a national provider, they had the audacity to fly baby Trump balloons in the studio with an nappy on, and I thought that was so disrespectful.
Gosh, I don't remember that from the time, Paul. They did that in the studio?
They did, mate. Yeah, they thought it was a big joke, mate. They had him flying behind the desk. It was a big ha ha ha. I thought, no way. Yeah. I'm not having that.
Well, I do wonder if they'd have done the same thing for Biden, for Barack Obama, for Bill Clinton. I mean, I think there is an almost accepted view within the BBC that Trump is a bad person. Everything he does is wrong.
Yeah, but they're supposed to be, like, unbiased, aren't they?
I know.
So they're not supposed to have an opinion. That's the last thing you do. And somebody should have been fired for that because it's just totally unacceptable.
And that's the reason you cancelled your licence fee?
Well, one of many, mate. I mean, a lot of their presenters have been left-wing, mate, and they're allowed to get away with saying what they say because whoever runs the BBC, at the moment it's Tim David, they're weak and they just haven't got the backbone to do what needs to be doing. And people are cancelling the licence in droves, Peter, because they just don't have it.
Certainly the statistics would back you up, Paul. I appreciate your call. Thank you. I want to talk to Andrew in Halifax about the diversity issue as well, because that's something we talked about with Matthew Hulbert a little bit earlier on. Big survey talking about people, their views on diversity. Only 49% of people thinking it is our strength. What do you think, Andrew? And thanks for the call.
Good evening, Peter. Well, I think it's changed. The meaning of diversity has changed over time. When I was growing up in the 1980s, there were kids from different backgrounds in my class at school. But because, practically all of Britain was recognisably British back then, it didn't matter. Now, to me, when I hear the word diversity, is all I hear is that person saying we want less and less white people around the place, and I find that very offensive.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is definitely anti-white racism out there. It's almost as if it's accepted. In fact, there was an academic who said that the British royal family was too white, and Channel 4 put her on Christmas Day with the alternative Christmas message. I wonder if there was a similar thing said by someone about a black family or an Asian family or about gay people or any other minority, not that white people are a minority obviously, but that would have been lauded to such a degree.
Sure, and it's also the interpretation of language to suit particular narratives. I mean, when Sarah Poachin on your show, and I listened in, said that it drives her mad when she sees too many black and too many Asian people in adverts, there was a great big hoo-ha about it. But for somebody to say, we want more diversity, i.e. we want fewer white people around, that seems to be okay, and it's not okay.
Sarah Poachin later apologised for her comments.
She shouldn't have done, by the way.
You don't think she should have apologised for that?
Well, to the left, you never apologise to the left for anything.
Okay. Well, listen, Sarah Poachin did apologise for that, certainly, and she came on the show and made those remarks, and certainly there was a bit of a political controversy about it for a few days.